Good afternoon. A little out of practice here. Good afternoon and welcome to the third meeting of the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Government Affairs for the 2023 to 2024 interim. Thank you to everyone for joining us online and in person. Ms. Velasquez, please call the roll.
Senator Daly,
Here.
Senator Flores, Senator Hansen, Assemblyman Carter, Assemblyman De Silva, Assemblyman Gurr,
Here.
Assemblyman MacArthur, Chair Torres.
Here, and if you could please mark Senator Flores and Assemblyman De Silva absent, excused, and present when they arrive. As a reminder, before we begin, I'd like to review a couple housekeeping items. Meeting and materials can be accessed on the committee's webpage located on the Nevada Legislature's website. Anyone who would like to receive electronic notification of and access to the committee's agenda, minutes, and final report can do so by signing up on the legislature's website. When testifying in person or on Zoom, please turn on and speak directly into the microphone and then turn it off when you are done speaking. Our next agenda item is public comment. There will be a public comment period at the beginning and the end of the meeting, with a public comment limited to 2 minutes per speaker. Staff will time each speaker during public comment to ensure everyone is given a fair opportunity to speak. In addition to testifying in person, public comment may be provided in 4 different ways, all of which are listed on the agenda. To provide public comment by telephone, please call 888-475-4499, then enter the meeting ID 865-8476-2508 and press pound. When prompted for a participant ID, press pound again. At this time, is there anyone in Carson City wishing to testify in public comment?
There's no one here.
Hi. Thank you. I don't believe we see anybody there, so we'll go ahead and come here to Las Vegas. Is there anybody here in Las Vegas wishing to testify in public comment? I don't see anyone itching to get to the podium yet today, so we'll go ahead and go to the phones. Is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in public comment?
Thank you, Chair. There are no callers to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you. Then we will go ahead and move on to agenda item number 3, which is approval of the minutes for the meetings on January 25th and February 22nd, 2024. Next on our agenda is the approval of the minutes for the meetings on January 25th and February 22nd. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
I have a motion from Assemblyman Carter. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second. I believe that was Senator Daly. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and take a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And seeing as there is no opposition, this motion does pass. At this time, we'll go ahead and go on to agenda item number 4, presentations on the management and activities of vector control related entities. I know we're all itching to get this presentation started. It's not going to sting one bit. So please, when you're ready, go ahead and get started. And the word of the day is back.
So good afternoon, committee members and Madam Chair.
One moment. I think we're waiting from Southern Nevada. We're just loading up the PowerPoint. And then, Mr. Brown, if you could just let us know when we're all ready to get started. Just as a reminder, please put the mic on. So there's like the mic button directly in front of the microphone.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Are we ready? My name's David Brown. I'm here to discuss the need for dedicated mosquito control here in Clark County, Nevada. Just as a little bit of background, I know on the agenda I'm listed as a special project coordinator for the American Mosquito Control Association, but I need to let you know that I'm not here on the American Mosquito Control Association's behalf. I'm actually here representing myself as a homeowner as well as representing my family. I have a daughter and grandchildren, and probably the residents who are also kind of itching a little bit about why are we having such a significant problem with mosquitoes, and is there something we can do about it? And I'm going to try to offer some ideas on what's the best way of potentially addressing the mosquito problem that currently exists within Las Vegas. As a little bit of background, obviously you all know about Clark County. You have about 2.2 million residents that live here year-round. The Environmental Health Program objectives, who currently addresses mosquito control, I can't see the screen, so I have to get closer. They do conduct routine surveillance to determine species, abundance, and disease status, and that's a good thing. However, their counterpart notification for breeding site interventions is not within that same department, so there tends to be a lag of any type of intervention that may occur. Anytime you have education on mosquitoes, the bitings, the potential sites where they can develop is always a good thing. But what's really troubling here is there's absolutely no coordinated mosquito control efforts across Clark County. Okay. So, for example, in 2017, the Aedes aegypti mosquito was identified in northern part of Las Vegas, and you can see it there in the circles, or circled with the spots and number of mosquitoes. It was in 4 zip codes that was initially identified. By 2023, it has exploded and expanded throughout all of Clark County, even down into Henderson. You had 43 zip codes now, and those numbers are simply going to increase as time goes on without any intervention efforts. In concert with that, you can see that the citizens' Aedes aegypti counts have gone up, as well as the citizen complaints have gone up. Now, I know Las Vegas is a desert. Mosquitoes require water to develop, but candidly, we seem to have plenty of water for that to happen, as demonstrated right here by the Sahara Casino and Hotel. And then, of course, backyard sources, which are great for this species of mosquito to propagate throughout communities. But what's really most concerning to me about this is the amount of visitors that Las Vegas sees in a year. Last time I gave this presentation was in August, and I know the speaker, or the chairperson that I was speaking with, suggested 50 million visitors. I see 40.8, but what's concerning is that they come from all over the globe. And as I'm sure you might be aware of, all over the globe we have significant mosquito diseases that can be brought here, left behind, and then transmitted by the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which tends to be really a human biter of that's its preference. So you want to make sure that we try to reduce those mosquito populations before that happens. So the long-term community impact on this is there's no single coordinated mosquito control program across Clark County. Aedes aegypti will continue to expand. The community needs a consistent and organized integrated mosquito management plan, and potentially or hopefully that's being done or developed by an actual agency. And then, of course, we're always going to see the diseases that are listed here, whether they're Zika, chikungunya, dengue, West Nile virus, and any other new viruses that may present themselves. Now, as a background on why I don't believe right now we have a very effective program in Clark County, the National Association of County and City Health Officials conducted 2 surveys, and the last one was in 2020. And there were 10 competencies, but 5 core competencies that I really want the board here to focus on. One was routine mosquito surveillance. And I've got that underscored because that appears to be happening, at least right now, within the Environmental Health Department that's charged with conducting mosquito control, or at least or identifying what the mosquito issues are. However, there needs to also be larviciding and adulticiding capabilities, routine vector control, species-specific abatement activities, and pesticide resistance testing. Now, the reason why I have that in italics is that because across the nation, when this was done, a lot of agencies weren't conducting pesticide resistance testing. So there were many that needed to be a little bit more effective. But dedicated mosquito programs demonstrated that at least 63% of them throughout the country were very effective based on this survey, while other programs, such as those that were housed in city or county environmental health departments, only 20% of them were very effective at being able to conduct effective mosquito control. Now, why is this an issue? Well, again, based on that survey, small communities, about 89% needed improvement, and small was identified as less than having 50,000 residents. Medium, between 50,000 and 500,000 residents, about 63% needed improvement. Large, 500,000 residents, only 49% needed improvement. And yet in Clark County, they're really only conducting one of the aspects of the 5 competencies, which is surveillance. So I leave question marks on just how much improvement I believe Clark County needs to have an effective mosquito control program. Now, as mentioned, the Environmental Health Department is currently responsible for conducting mosquito control in Clark County, or I should say conducting mosquito surveillance in Clark County. Many times where the issue is with that is that the program is kind of housed within a division or a department, as opposed to having dedicated staff. And I don't want to say anything anything bad about any of the people that are trying to conduct mosquito control here in Clark County, because I've chatted with them several times. They're very effective. They're very efficient people. They're very bright. They simply have too many other programs going on or too many other responsibilities going on to be able to conduct effective mosquito control in the area. If you don't have dedicated staff, you're simply not going to have a good, effective mosquito control program. So you got to ask yourself, can the existing program address the expansion of mosquitoes and other vectors? And I would suggest that the answer is no. Can the existing program participate in a national public health framework, which the picture on the right, CDC just came out with a national public health framework for the prevention and control of vector-borne diseases in humans? I would argue strongly that no. I don't believe currently Clark County is in a position to be able to effectively do that. So does existing program other responsibilities preventing it from being effective? As I mentioned, many of the folks that are currently trying to conduct mosquito control have other responsibilities. So I don't believe they have the time or the resources available to be able to effectively control these here. And is there a way to for the community to have an effective mosquito control program? And I believe there is. But before I get there, I want to suggest one thing. Would you combine fire and police? And back in the day a little bit, in the 70s and 80s, the idea was, we can save money if we can cross-train police and firefighters, put them kind of all together to be able to address some of the costs or the concerns on trying to save money. And on paper, it seemed like a great idea. Unfortunately, however, it proved to be the cost and time involved in the cross-training proved prohibitive. You started diluting the expertise in both the police departments and the fire departments. So in my opinion, it was not effective, and it was recognized that each program needed specialized personnel. And I'm going to suggest that the same thing needs to happen with mosquito and vector control. So what is needed? Well, respect for the entomological work, which again, many of the people I've chatted with in the Environmental Health Department, they have strong backgrounds in entomology. They would be able to do the work if that's all they were doing. Unfortunately, they're also having to do restaurant inspections, yard inspections on swimming pools. They simply don't have the time and necessary resources to be able to effectively conduct mosquito and vector control. You want to make sure you're up to date and use the best available science and best practices. And I already mentioned that I am with the American Mosquito Control Association. They have many resources that are available to help initiate a good integrated mosquito management program for Clark County. You may, based on, I always hate to use the CC word, which is climate change. It's become a political, to me, kind of a tetherball. But there's no denying that some things are changing a little bit here relative to temperatures and just the expansion of potential mosquitoes and viruses. So you really want to make sure that we're prepared also for any other invasive species that may make themselves present here in Clark County, as well as any of the other vectors that is currently being identified by Centers for Disease Control control and prevention. And I would suggest that mosquito and vector control needs to stand alone in this process. So how can this be accomplished in order of preference? I thought I updated this slide, but apparently it's the old one showed up again. I believe a standalone special district would be very appropriate for Clark County. Nevada, I believe, has the necessary statutes on the books to be able to make this happen. It just needs to take the political will to start initiating it. There are other ways this can work. A dedicated program housed within another program can be effective. And for example, in Fairfax, Virginia, they have such a program, but they have dedicated funding sources and dedicated personnel that are solely responsible for conducting mosquito and vector control. And lastly, professional mosquito services. And what I mean by that is there are actually organizations that have the full complement of integrated mosquito management resources that are available for hire. So I want to thank you again for listening to my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I'm looking forward to trying to protect our community here from the most dangerous animal on the planet. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for that presentation on the most dangerous animal in the planet. I hope that didn't fly over everyone's head, as I know you actually speak perhaps faster than I do.
Oh,
and so I
sorry.
applaud you for that. I think at this time, committee members, unless there's any objections, I'm going to go ahead and go to the presentation from the Greater Los Angeles County Vector Control District so that we can hear the complete range of mosquito conversation and dialogue. And then we'll go ahead and open up for questions. Thank you. And so at this time, if we could have the presenters for the Greater Los Angeles County Vector Control District that are available on Zoom, go ahead and begin their presentation. Ms. Suzanne, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, Ms. Clue, I know it's a challenge. Good afternoon, and good afternoon, committee members, Madam Chair. Let me just share my screen here and start the presentation. So bear with me for a moment. I assume you all here tried this before and it didn't go. There we go. Here we go. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and we're happy to provide you with some of how our special district, one of the options that Mr. Brown has suggested might be a good one for Nevada. That's exactly what we are. We are a California special district, and I'm happy to hear that there is statute in Nevada law that would allow perhaps something similar for you all to be an option. So let me go a little bit into how we are organized, what we're doing, and all those such things. And then after that, myself as well as my staff will be available for questions. So our mission, we're working on restating it, but currently we say it's to reduce populations of public health vectors below nuisance levels. And I will gladly admit that that's one of the points we're momentarily not fully successful, because we have the same problem with Aedes aegypti. Being all over Los Angeles County, very difficult to control mosquito and mostly focused on biting people. So they are a considerable nuisance despite our best efforts at this moment. We've also seen a dire prediction that Dave Brown made here for us. We've seen the first transmission of dengue locally in Los Angeles County late last season in 2 occasions where somebody brought it in from their travel and then transmitted it. So that gets right to our second bullet point: prevent human infection associated with mosquito transmitted disease. So we have always West Nile virus cases, and now we're potentially having dengue cases, Zika, chikungunya. Anybody can get on a plane and be in Los Angeles within a matter of hours. So in all, we also try to prevent loss of property values and commercial enterprise as a result of vector occurrence. And that usually really responds a lot to some of our large midge, non-biting midge populations that we're also trying to keep at bay, because when people are along the spreading grounds, as Los Angeles is trying to infiltrate as much water as possible from this winter's and any winter storms, we have to make sure we protect our residents from the huge midge plumes that result, and we're working closely with our water agencies to try to keep that a nuisance and to a minimum. It impacts meat packing plants, bakeries, auto repair and paint shops along the river when these large numbers of these insects emerge. So that's kind of the mission that we're standing on. We're working on maybe some new verbiage for that. We have really two locations officially, Santa Fe Springs and a satellite office in Sylma, because as you will see next, we have a huge district to cover. So we have two offices. We just ran out of space for our Sylma satellite office. And so we have last year acquired a new facility for us to move in after this year's mosquito season and some remodeling in Pacoima, not very far. So, but we're not able to cover the area that we serve from just one location. So historically, you can see our district here, Greater Los Angeles County Vector Control District, is the one in orange. It is the largest of 5 districts in LA County that are kind of historically grown. We were formed in 1952, and we currently serve 37 cities, as well as some areas of unincorporated LA County. Our district contains a little over 1 million parcels, just a little over 1,000 square miles, and a little over 6 million residents. So definitely a huge population that we serve in this area. So you can see how far drawn out our district is, and that it makes sense to have a second office so that we're not traveling far every day. So our powers derive from the California Health and Safety Code. That's our founding statute. Everything in there in terms of what needs to take place to form a district and how it should be organized basically derives from that. It gives us the powers to administer surveillance programs and conduct the appropriate studies of vector and vector-borne diseases, then as a result of that, take any and all necessary or proper actions to prevent the occurrence of vectors and vector-borne diseases. And then, of course, last but not least, take any and all necessary or proper actions to abate vector-borne disease. So we have an abatement ability. I would say it is written in the California Health and Safety Code, a bit cumbersome. We can theoretically threaten residents with abatement that would allow us access to any property that we deem is producing vectors, B, allow us to potentially fine those property owners, and then C, abate any such vector problem and actually charge the property owner for those efforts. However, and I don't want to go into too much detail unless you're interested, it is a pretty cumbersome process where there's hearings and there's times that the resident or property owner gets time to correct the issue, and in the meantime, we can have access to abate the problem. So we have never actually yet used those powers to fine anyone. It usually resolves itself before we get there. So again, this is basically what we are properly authorized to do. So we do a property inspection. We determine the presence of a nuisance. This can be a commercial property, a home, private property. We also inspect a lot of public sources such as flood control channels, underground storm drains, and then we are authorized to abate that nuisance either directly or by giving notice to the property owner, and then determine, again, and I guess I talked through this slide a little bit in my last slide already, if there has been compliance, and if not, we can definitely control these vectors and treat property with the appropriate physical, chemical, or biological means. And as well as then charge the property owner for those services if the abatement process goes to the fullest of its extent. If fines are not paid, liens can be placed on property so that when the property is sold the next time around, we would get reimbursed during escrow. So our revenue source to fund our usual program is multifold. We have residential areas, we have some little agricultural areas left, and definitely commercial properties. So currently our assessment rate that cannot exceed $20 total annually currently, but we are preparing to go to a Proposition 218, which has approved the $20 limit for our services every year that our board of directors can assess to our property taxes in our service area of Los Angeles County. We're working on getting resident approval by the end of 2025 to increase that, because as you can see, we're currently at $1889 per parcel for anything less than an acre, residential, agricultural, or commercial. And then 5 acres agricultural and commercial parcels of 20 acres or less. And then we can charge an additional $5.99 for additional acreage, 1 acre for residential, 5 acres for agricultural, and 20 acres for additional commercial. So again, not to exceed $20, and as we're nearing our cap here with the additional challenges of these Aedes mosquitoes, we are preparing to get voter approval, hopefully in the fall of 2025 for higher assessment. So we also have a small area of a special assessment that came after the fact that deals with black fly control. Black flies emerge from running water other than mosquitoes that emerge from standing water. And so we've had areas along the Los Angeles River that have huge problems with black flies. So we created a 1-mile buffer along the river that gets all this special treatment to have their black flies controlled. It's about 300,000 parcels, and we charge those parcels an additional 30 cents annually. You can see from the list of cities and neighborhoods that it's a pretty broad area. So we also do get a little bit of what's called ad valorem taxes. This was passed in 78 with the Proposition 13 was decided that property taxes to be 1% of the full cash value of any real estate property plus an amount for local assessments, which we assess $18.89. And then if there hasn't been a change of ownership in the property ownership, then every year the tax assessor is allowed to put an inflationary factor of 2% onto that property. Of course, LA properties have in value increased by more than 2% annually. So when the property is sold, then the new value of the property that has been sold for gets assessed, and that dramatically increases the overall value that is assessed. So we get a small percentage of that assessment amount. We're sharing it with lighting districts, cemetery districts, all sorts of people chip away at it every year a little bit, and we approve tax sharing resolutions. Nevertheless, because of the huge increase in property value in Los Angeles County, this amount is still a good chunk of money that adds to our overall ability to serve. So for our organizational charge, we are overall supervised by a board of trustees. Every city appoints a trustee from their midst. And then we also have one city for LA County unincorporated that is appointed by the Board of Supervisors. And then there's myself, the general manager, and just recently we created an assistant general manager position below me. And so we can see that from there it goes to, we have facilities and maintenance, scientific, technical, they do all the surveillance. And then of course the core of our work in operations, all the folks that do all the mosquito control at all times. And then under my assistant general manager, we brought together communications, finance, and human resources. As we have an ever-growing staff, the finance and human resources have become more important. And as we are really trying to reach our homeowners because of this new Aedes aegypti problem, communications has also taken a significant role. So the board, in terms of their responsibilities, It's a 37-member board, so it's large. You can imagine people with various agendas, but we ask them to set their political agendas from their cities aside and come together only for the purpose of vector control and think of our district as a whole and what is in everybody's best interest consolidatedly instead of just their city's best interest. So they hire the general manager, they establish and approve the budget expenditures, set the appropriate assessment rate then for that budget amount to be raised, and they retain their own legal counsel. We generated some board trustee policies, just so you have an idea. We have a board meeting every second Thursday. I think theoretically, California special districts are allowed to have one every 3 months. We are meeting monthly. I think it makes for a better way to get all of our items addressed and make policy and move forward with the district's business. The board gets a travel stipend to be reimbursed for their attendance that is set in the health and safety code. So they created themselves, the trustees, an absentee policy because for a while we had problems making quorum, and so now they can only miss 2 consecutive meetings, and then they'll get a little warning saying if you miss a third one, you are considered to have abandoned your position, and we will ask your city to appoint a new representative. We make sure they're in compliance with ethics trainings every 2 years, sexual harassment prevention trainings every 2 years, and we have all of them fill out Form 700 so that they can disclose any conflict of interest in terms of working at the trustee as a trustee on the board. So we have 92 full-time staff. We have 2 part-time staff, and during this season, I want to say during the summer, but it's not really true anymore, like pretty much from May through November is how our mosquito season fully runs. We try to hire 42 help as seasonal staff. So our district departments that we have structured, and you saw some of it in our organizational start. We have administration, we have operations. Those are the folks doing most of the control work, scientific, technical. These are the people doing all our mosquito monitoring and submitting all our mosquitoes for testing, advising operations in terms of where treatments are necessary and prudent, as well as developing new control options for us. We're really heavily looking into doing sterile insect technique as a control. We're planning to release sterilized male mosquitoes that are not biting because they don't need the protein in the blood meal to lay eggs. So male mosquitoes never bite. It's only the females. And we're planning on sterilizing those males by irradiating them and as a return and releasing them to mate with the wild females and result in eggs that are not viable. And then, of course, we will talk about our communications efforts as well. So under the general manager, and we went over that, we have the front office, the fleet and maintenance, scientific, technical, our IT folks, operations, and then as we discussed with the assistant general manager. So we have our own maintenance staff. They do everything from maintaining our fleet and doing the necessary maintenance on the vehicles. They also fabricate their own, our own changes to the vehicles. You can see just here on the very side that we have these right-hand drive Jeeps that have a little bracket where the spray wand is hanging from. We treat gutters with these vehicles. That way we drive on the correct side closest to the gutter. They can expect for mosquito presence. And then treat. So the way everything is set up is all developed in-house and then manufactured. We change all these vehicles according to what we need out of any given vehicle. And our maintenance staff makes sure everything is working well and safe because we have about 100 vehicles in our fleet. So then we talked about scientific technical. They do the in the field surveillance. They set mosquito traps. They identify the mosquitoes. They work with the state hotline. California has a dead bird hotline. Residents will call in dead birds, and we will go pick them up, and they get tested by the state for West Nile virus. It's a good indicator of where our activity is high. But all the mosquitoes we collect in our mosquito trapping all over also get sampled together into a sample of up to 50 and submitted for testing for West Nile virus, St. Louis encephalitis, Western equine encephalomyelitis. We're not submitting a lot of mosquitoes for checking for dengue. The number of positive mosquitoes on that front is so low, it's not really quite worth the money. So you can see there our traps are really spaced out over our service area. And we make sure we visit every trap site twice a month. So that's what our surveillance is based on. Then we have our operations department. Of course, they do all the checking. These are underground storm drains where we check, and then a lot of residential yard inspections, swimming pools that we get called in that are not maintained. All of those treatments at our 80s response team, they go to a lot of backyards. A lot of folks have water in places behind their shed or garage that they haven't even seen in just so many years, and we go and we help them inspect their yards so that they can help themselves have fewer mosquitoes, as well as treating all these public sources that we are aware of, and large sources that have mosquitoes emerge. And then last here but not least, of course, our communications department, where everybody is really big on outreach with social media. We go to a ton of community events. We have an education program that serves currently fifth graders mostly, and we go out to schools. Schools can sign up. We try to educate our future residents with this, and I think our mobile education unit really makes a great impact on students when they get to come on and be mosquito control scientists for themselves and learn about everything we might have to do. We go to community presentations, and we really try to be omnipresent on social media. We're still working on improving that. So that's a quick overview. I know I haven't touched on a lot of things that are more organizational, like we have all our operational staff separated in zones, and they get very familiar with this area where they really know every puddle until it dries up later in the summer. We have the specialized programs, like we treat flood control channels with vehicles that have hard rubber tires so that we don't get flats at any given time. So there's a lot more, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. At this time, members, I would like to invite you to ask any questions. And actually, we do have... I apologize. I totally forgot. We have one more presentation in this category. And I know my committee members are like, how did our legislative council find so many mosquito experts? It appears that there are so many of them. So we're going to go ahead and invite Ms. Krista Jenkins, the district manager of Douglas County Mosquito Abatement District. Please begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to speak in front of you today. I'm Krista Jenkins. I'm the manager for the Douglas County Mosquito Abatement District in Minden, Nevada. Get this to work here. There we go. Our district is within Douglas County. The population of Douglas County is somewhere between 49 and 50,000. And so we fall into that little category of being small. And after listening to the very informative presentations before me, I feel a little bit like a postage stamp on a large envelope. But I will try my best to give you an overshot of what we do as a small district, which I think, in my opinion, is a lot. Our district is basically the Carson Valley. and that is 455 square miles. Inside of our district, we have also created a working area, which is predominantly unimproved pastures, a lot of irrigation, garlic, and some grains. And then on the interior of the district, we do have our suburban areas and small subdivisions. And then on the somewhere towards the north side of our district, we have 1 and 5 acre parcel subdivisions. Within our district, there are also outside of our district 2 areas that we service. And we have a limited contract with Douglas County to service those areas. One of them is the Nevada side of Lake Tahoe, which runs from State Line to Glenbrook. And the other one is on the south of us, which includes a little bit of Topaz Lake and the surrounding community of Topaz Ranch Estates. We have a 5-person elected board, 2 that have 2-year terms and 3 that have 4-year terms. We typically meet 4 times during the season and more if it deems necessary. Funding, and I think that's one of the things that I'm really here to talk about to a certain extent. Douglas County is different than I think a lot of the other districts within Nevada. I can't include Clark County on that, but we have over 17 different tax districts in our county. I am probably the 3rd from the bottom of the rung. If you take in consideration of the fire district, which has all of Douglas County, I'm probably the 2nd largest area that needs to be serviced, and I'm at the bottom of the totem pole there. Our tax rate is 0.0345%, and to put that in a little bit of perspective, is an average subdivision homeowner will pay somewhere between $3 and $5 a year for mosquito abatement. All the big ranches get a discount on their taxes, so it takes all of our district to pour their money into what we do. We also get revenue from consolidated taxes. We get interest from the local government investment pool and the limited contract with Douglas County. Just as a side here, because of our tax cap, we do not get any tax raises. The raises would come from new development. If any of the 17 districts folds, then we would go into a tax grab, and since we are at the bottom, we get a very minuscule amount of that. And in the 17 years that I have been with the district, that has only happened 1 time. Our district was thought about in 1968, and through the legal channels, we became a NRS 318 improvement district. The interesting story of how we became a district is there was a veterinarian that was in a rancher's pasture artificially inseminating some rancher's cows, and he was getting bit. So he asked if there was any way that we could start some kind of control. And after we went through the legal channels, that's how we became, and we were born a district. Subsequently, that veterinarian and that rancher were on our board for many years. We started with literally a dipper and a box. A gentleman was a school teacher, and he would do mosquito control in the summers. And his basic products for treatment were some larvicide briquettes, a lot of larvicide oil, and a crop duster that he contracted to do adulticide applications. He started out with 1 Ford Bronco, and currently today we have 7 trucks, 4 foggers, 4 side-by-side ground equipments, 1 ATV, a boat with a mud motor, and 2 treatable drones. Surveillance is just one aspect of our program. We go into all areas of Douglas County within our district, including the 2 outside of our district, looking for standing water in any way, shape, or form. We do trap to look for adult populations. Our season basically runs from March through October. It's totally weather dependent. Sometimes we can start earlier, sometimes we end up going later. In Douglas County, we do not have any reservoir systems, So all the water that we rely on for our agricultural community comes from the mountains, and we rely heavily on the snowpack. And even in our worst drought that we had a few years ago, we are never out of water because a lot of the bigger ranches have pumps and they're constantly pumping water. So we always have something to do. At least twice a month, if not more, I try to hire a plane to fly the valley so I can survey the whole area from above. I look for irrigation water patterns. I look for areas that are flooded as far as irrigation, so it saves a little bit of time so our ground crew does not have to go in there. They can go specifically to other areas that need immediate attention. I can also, when we do get flood runoff from the snowpack, I can monitor the flood patterns and have a better idea and make better decisions on when we need to go ahead and enter those to start surveying them. Not only do we treat standing water in the agricultural area, we also treat detention ponds, retention ponds, catch basins, private ponds. We have an extensive ditch system that services the irrigation along with many, many sloughs, and we have 2 major rivers that run through our valley. We set traps, like I said before, to monitor the adult populations, and I'll get into trapping it in just a few more minutes. And we also respond to service requests. Our technology, we have a program, a cloud-based program called Field Seeker. And that captures all of our data from our surveillance to our trapping and to our ground crew for our treatments and our drones. It's a cloud-based program, so each employee does have an application on their phone that they can put in the data that is required, whether it's a site visit or it's a treatment, to give us a better activity of what's happening in the area. And also, I use it for reporting. Larvicide is probably our biggest part of our program. We use several different products, and they range with residual from 7 days up to 30 days in the waters that we use basically out in the pastures. The other products are called briquettes, and they have a residual of anywhere from 30 days up to 180 days. And we just determine what kind of water we're dealing with will determine what product goes into the water. We do this by ground, we do this by hand, we do this with our ground equipment, with granular applicators. With ponds, we go on our boat with our mud motor. We also have 2 treating drones that we treat from the air. And we contract services with a helicopter and a fixed wing also. Trapping is very important to our district because we do have such an agricultural area. There is over 66,000 acres that we have to try and monitor and or treat. We test for West Nile virus, St. Louis encephalitis, and Western and equine encephalitis. We trap 4 nights a week, and we usually set 10 traps per night. Currently, when we gather our traps, we identify the mosquitoes. Then we have them sent to the Nevada Department of Agriculture for testing. Depending on the timing of getting the traps to the state and then getting the turnaround from the state on a result, sometimes that can be a few days, sometimes it can be a week, and on occasion it has taken us a week and a half to get our results. So we're going into 2 new types of technology this year. We're going to get a mosquito identify machine. We have over 16 different species in Nevada, and we feel that with this machine and all the great technology that's going to offer, that we'll ensure that we're getting the correct species identification to be tested. And also our goal is to purchase after our 1st of July a Codex PCR machine, so we will have the capability of doing our own testing, and we can have an approximate 60-minute turnaround. What that means to us is instead of having maybe a week to a week and a half turnaround to see if there's any virus in our mosquitoes, we can have a pretty fast idea of what virus may be running throughout our county, and it will offer us a much quicker response time. Our adulticide program consists of using our ground foggers in all of the subdivisions and outlying areas. We also use one of our drones that has a adulticide capability, and we do contract again with a fixed-wing aircraft to do big aerial portions of our valley. We do use several types of adulticide, and we rotate them to ensure that we're not having any resistance problems with mosquitoes. Our paper for Douglas County comes out 2 days a week, but we do have online access every day to post any type of adulticide event that we are going to do. And if people don't have online or they don't read the paper, the other way we do it is through our social media presence. And then I go around to each subdivision and we locate signs at all the entrances to make sure that people are very aware of the time and date that we are coming in. Mosquito control, mosquito abatement is a very expensive endeavor. Last year, just in product alone, for our small district, we spent over $400,000 in product itself. We treated close to 4,700 acres of ground, and we flew adulticide events of over 27,000 acres. To give you a snapshot of cost, to break it down just a little bit more, our larvicides that we use run anywhere from $13 to $20 a pound, and that rate for application is anywhere from 5 to 8 pounds per acre. So if you do some calculations at the high rate, that would mean that 1 acre could cost $160. If you take a 1 acre parcel, that could be 16,000 acres or dollars. And if you do 4 months of application at up to 30 days of residual, that 1 acre suddenly now becomes $64,000. Adulticides are just a little bit different. Our adulticides that we use run anywhere from $85 to $350 a gallon, and we have to convert that to ounces because the rate for adulticide on the average is about an ounce per acre. So at the high rate, 1 acre is going to cost $2.73. 100 acres is going to be $273, and so on and so forth. It's a little bit less of a cost, but you have to understand that we don't have, with adulticide applications, the luxury of having a 30-day window. This is per event, and there are a lot of variable conditions that create and make sure that we have a successful adulticiding event, and that's mostly derived from weather, whether it's temperature, inversion, wind, and time of application. So we do many events throughout this season. I think that before I sign off, I want to make sure that you understand that no matter what side of the coin you are on climate change, the fact of the matter is there are areas that are heating up in this world, including Nevada. And heat drives the life cycle of the mosquito, and heat drives the virus. And we don't currently in northern Nevada have to deal with the invasive species as these other presenters have offered. But we never know when that may happen, as certain mosquito species may adapt to our climate. And I truly believe that Clark County does need a mosquito abatement program. And I think it's very important that that gets started because we're all in this for public health and public safety. And we all try to work together to make people understand that it's not just our entities that do the work. It takes people to also help do the work and the community to work together to make the program successful. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you for that presentation. At this time, we'll go ahead and begin buzzing with our questions. At this time, members, do I have any questions? Do I have any in Northern Nevada? And Assemblyman Gurr, are you good? Just give me a thumbs up or a wave if you're fine. Okay. Assemblyman Carter.
Thank you very much. This is for, I believe, Mr. Brown. I'm looking at your map there, and it appears that we finally found something bad that doesn't get dumped in my district. And, we got the worst air quality in the valley, we got worst traffic in the valley and everything else, but apparently mosquitoes do not like the east side of Las Vegas. And I was just trying to, it's around the base of Sunrise Mountain and clear over around to Lake of Las Vegas, that incorporates the Wetlands Park that's got a lot of slow-moving water and back pools and stuff. I'm just wondering why we don't see any dots. I'm glad, but why we don't see any dots over there.
Well, I think you need to recognize what those dots represent. They actually represent the finding of Aedes aegypti mosquito, and that's the invasive mosquito. You actually have a fair amount of mosquitoes within your district. They're simply a different species. You have the Anopheline species, or the Culex, which is responsible for the transmission of West Nile virus. I'm pretty sure you have those there, but the map is only representing the invasive species that I presented here. If I were to represent all the mosquitoes, I'm pretty sure, the map would be covered with black dots.
Thank you.
I forgot my mic this time. Thank you for the presentations. I do have a couple questions. So, obviously, we have permission for mosquito districts to exist here in the state of Nevada as it stands right now. So I'm trying to understand, and perhaps a representative from Douglas County can speak a little bit more to what are the issues with ensuring that we're providing the services? Obviously, some communities have opted to provide more full services than others. I know here in Southern Nevada, we don't really, it doesn't have the full body of services that it seems Douglas County does. So if you can kind of speak to why that issue might exist.
Well, if I'm understanding the question properly, within the northern Nevada, there are other improvement districts that do mosquito and vector control. Washoe County works within their health department for their portion. Churchill County has quite an extensive program. City of Fernley runs it through the city. Mason Valley, which is in Yerington, has a small abatement program. And there are a few tribes up here in northern Nevada that have abatement programs. Most of the districts and the programs around here have been running for quite a while. We are under the auspice of the Department of Taxation, and that's kind of what drives what we can and can't do as far as raising any extra revenue. As in Nevada, we do not have an association, but we do have what we call the West Nile Working Group that and Clark County is included in that. That was originally developed when West Nile first started to come into Nevada, which was around 2005 and 2006. And that was formed that if any other entity needed help, if they had a breakout, that we were all available to come and help them. I'm not specifically sure if I answered your question, but we all take our job very seriously, and I can attest that in the beginning, when West Nile was here, it was very rampant. It's still here. We just never know when we're going to have any virus. My uncle contracted in 2007 the West Nile virus encephalitis, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, it's not anything that I would even want to wish on my worst enemy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your work on this, Ms. Jenkins. I think it's a very unique issue here in the state of Nevada, and I think it's something we're seeing more of here in Southern Nevada. Like it was mentioned earlier in our presentations, that we have to address. And so I'm trying to understand specifically, I guess, what is the level of funding that Douglas County receives right now? And I know you mentioned that number can't change, which I think is something, as legislators, we can look at this upcoming session if we'd like. But how much money do they receive right now? And then do you know how that compares to other areas? And maybe Mr. Brown can speak more to Southern Nevada. Thank you.
Krista Jenkins on record. I forgot to do that earlier. Our funding is basically, like I said, ad valorem, and the consolidated taxes, our interest from LGIP, and our contract revenue, which I need to revisit with Douglas County because currently it's at $21,000 for the year, and we are finding that we're spending more money because costs are going up. I can tell you that my budget for the expenditures for this coming season have been determined to be right around between $800,000 and $900,000. I cannot speak to any other district in the area. I would like to maybe know that information, but as far as I'm concerned, my concentration is for my district only. And Washoe County is, again, they have a completely different type of funding.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can speak to what the funding capabilities are here in southern Nevada. I do know, as what she described, ad valorem taxes tend to be the one of the more significant funding mechanisms for agencies, particularly in California, but and Florida and other states that have very effective mosquito control programs. What I will say, though, is it tends to become a local issue, and I know there are some published papers, and particularly one that just came out of Texas, that identified what the residents were willing to pay for effective mosquito control programs. And it really needs to become a local issue, at least in my opinion, because many of the mosquitoes are going to be identified from the local, municipality where they're trying to be addressed. The paper identified that residents were willing to pay a minimum of $20 per resident for effective mosquito control within the community. So I think at least here in Las Vegas, I haven't been able to identify what would be necessary for that. I do know that an agency existed here in Clark County, I believe in 2002, and then for whatever reason it was disbanded or broken apart. Why that happened, I don't have the information on that, at least based on my research. I haven't been able to find why that happened. But I do know, and at least based on the two presentations by both of these mosquito control agency directors, you really need a dedicated and directed program to effectively have good mosquito control in the area.
Thank you. And I think that kind of brings me to my final question for the greater Los Angeles County Vector Control District. And I think that you all have a model for how local governments can work together to really target the issue of mosquitoes in our community. And so I'm wondering, how if you could talk a little bit more to how the organization kind of came to be, whether or not your state requires that agency to exist, or if it's permissive like it is here in the state of Nevada, and how you've kind of overcome, I think, what we see in southern Nevada and probably throughout most of the state is, this is what the health district does, and that's what the city does, and then this is what the county does, and everybody kind of has their own plans and agencies that they're implementing and the programs that they're implementing, but they're not working together.
Yeah, so I can speak to that. We do not have a mandate for a mosquito control district. Large swaths of California are covered by mosquito control districts, and I know that, for example, our local agency formation commission here in Los Angeles County, they were really interested in having all of Los Angeles County covered one way or another by a vector control district, and they have extensively worked on researching areas that have no vector control and made sure they get annexed into one of the 5 vector control districts. So our district emerged on the southern portion of the Los Angeles River because of the mosquitoes that were emerging from the river and the flooding at the time before maybe even the river was fully improved. And then the residents have really taken action and demanded a district to form. And so a small program was formed. And then once we had the district established, it was a matter of time as we started with a few cities. More and more cities joined the program and were kind of organically grown. And then some of the other areas, like the west side along the coast, residents there decided they needed their own program and created their own district because they thought maybe we were overall too large. As portions of our San Gabriel Valley decided to split up from us and provide separate services and create their own vector control districts. Districts are kind of different, some of them, like, for example, our neighbor to the south in Orange County, they are a full service district. They also do rodent control and flea control and surveillance for ticks and things, while we are mostly focused on black flies, mosquitoes, and non-biting midge swarms, because we also have a health department that has a vector control program, the LA County Health Department, and they are focusing on flea surveillance, tick surveillance, things that we don't provide. So that's a little bit also still the historically grown part of how this is all organized. We work all together very well. I mean, we work a lot with our local health departments. We work with our neighboring districts. We work closely with acute communicable disease under LA County Health Department, as well as the Long Beach has their own health department. We work with them for the report of cases of vector-borne disease such as West Nile virus. And now that we had dengue, we get informed and then we work together on trying to prevent further infections. So the collaboration on a county-wide basis is definitely intense, and something I didn't mention before, for a program our size, and we have a sizable number of visitors coming into LA County every year as well, with Hollywood and the theme parks and all of these things. So there is a lot of travel related, as well as we have a very diverse population of residents that go back to areas to visit family and friends that are currently dengue endemic. So we have a lot of different diseases coming back with both visitors as well as residents into our area. Our current budget is in the low $24 million for a district our size to do the things we do. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I wouldn't want to repel anyone from asking more questions. I think Senator Daley has a question in Carson City.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question, and maybe someone can expound it. Maybe all three of you can talk about it. I know not too long ago here in northern Nevada and Washoe County, there was, I believe it was an outbreak, and so the county advertised and told people, hey, we're going to be spraying to try to control this. And I know we had some pushback from people saying, oh, you can't spray in my neighborhood, and what's it going to do to my dog, and everything under the sun. So I was just curious how much communication with the public there is on, the effects. And I remember when I was a kid, they used to do the misting, and you could smell it and various things. Obviously, it didn't kill anybody. So, kill the mosquitoes, though. And then I would just say on the other side of that, in my career, when I was working in construction, and we worked out at the Valmy Power Station, and it was a particularly wet year, and they didn't have any controls. And if you don't have the controls and you have a wet year, those mosquitoes can be overwhelming. They can actually cause harm, other than the possible diseases. I mean, you have a swarm of 80, 90, 100 mosquitoes, and you're the only target. It's an unpleasant situation.
Krista Jenkins here with Douglas County. As far as my comment on the adulticiding that you were referring to, we do use, and most districts and entities use, ultra-low volume. And basically, to break that down is, a lot of people do say, oh my God, you came over and you went through and there's pesticide everywhere. And in reality, as I mentioned before, one shot glass full of chemical can treat 1 acre. And ultra-low volume really means the droplets are measured in microns, and we are, by law, we calibrate our machines every year. And just to put it in perspective, if you take a human hair, that is the size of the droplet, and they're measured in 18 to 30 microns. So they're very, very small, and they dissipate very quickly. That's why the timing of the event is very important. As far as pushback from Douglas County residents, we do a lot on education, and I answer every single phone call that comes into our district, as with emails, and when we do our service requests. If somebody doesn't want to be fogged for whatever reason in the community, and we create a no fog zone within our mapping system on our computers. And what that means is our driver goes into the subdivision, and when we come against that address, we put a 300-foot buffer completely around that address. An alarm goes off, the system shuts down, we drive through that portion of the no fog zone, then the system comes back on. And so we try as best we can to make sure that we honor those requests for people for whatever reason, whether it's they just don't like pesticide environmentally, or if they have health concerns or whatever. And as far as notifying the community that we're coming in, I addressed that a little bit earlier, but that's one of the reasons that we do put up signs, and it's very time consuming, but we do have people that rely on those signs. And I did make a mistake one time because I ran out of time and I didn't get the sign up, and one of the gentlemen that was in fogging that night got a nice little earful. So I addressed that complaint the next day, and I told the lady, and I will stick to that will never happen. So in our little community, that's the best way that we can inform people, is to let them know how the adulticide works, what the ramifications are, make SDS sheets and our labels available to them so they can fully understand and listen to their requirements, their complaints, their concerns, so that we keep a good positive presence in our valley.
And thank you. I just wanted to get out on the record that all the precautions are taken, not treating the mosquitoes if it went untreated or unchecked is probably worse. And if the people weren't getting the benefit of everybody else not complaining, they might change their tune. But no, thank you for the explanation. We know it's safe. We know it works. We shouldn't be afraid of it.
Yeah, and if I may just add to that, all of the pesticides that
And
are
if you could
used.
state your name for the record, sorry.
I'm sorry, David Brown. All of the pesticides that are used by mosquito control agencies are registered by the Environmental Protection Agency to identify any potential risks that may be involved with their treatment. And after the registration process is complete, it has been demonstrated that the product can be used with minimum risk. You can't really say that there's absolutely no risk, because actually me just taking a drink of water out of this cup, I may have risk of swallowing it incorrectly. However, the pesticides that are registered for use by mosquito control agencies have been demonstrated to be effective and pose no significant risk to the human population.
Thank you. At this time, members, are there any additional questions? I don't believe that there are any more. I think this
If I may.
this agenda item just buzzed by. Oh, go ahead.
If I may make one more comment, and this has to do with the ad valorem, and I can...
And your name for the record, please.
I'm sorry, Krista Jenkins, for the record. I would love to be able to raise my ad valorem tax, because I always am scrounging for money. And because of the tax cap, that doesn't necessarily happen. But I think one thing that should be understood within Nevada is that if a district is wanting to be created, it's going to take a vote of the people to want to be able to have to raise their taxes or include another type of tax item to their property taxes. We do have areas in Northern Nevada where there is a community that does not want their taxes raised. It's an agricultural community, and I can say with assurance that there has been several people that have got serious West Nile virus, and even though they understand that mosquitoes do pose a very risk, including death, because of the tax raises, they are just adamantly against raising any taxes. So I think that when we talk about ad valorem, all those considerations need to be understood, and mostly because of they have to vote, or they should be able to vote, from my understanding, on whether or not that needs to happen.
Thank you. Assemblymember Gerd, did you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. I was just sitting here listening to the whole presentation. It sounds to me like Las Vegas has some issues, or Clark County. And it sounds to me like they're very uncoordinated in their efforts and what they need to do. So it sounds like Washoe and Douglas and the counties that are impacted on a lesser level have districts that are joined together with their cities. To me, it sounds like that Clark County needs to get the cities in Clark County together and form a district and go after the bugs. Just a comment.
Thank you. And I don't know that I have anybody from Washoe County here right now, and maybe in Carson City. But I know that there has been some conversations or some complaints about just like there not being a coordinated enough effort between like the cities and the counties within that area. So I think it's a greater conversation that we can have. And I agree, though, that, strikingly, maybe because Southern Nevada hasn't always had so many mosquitoes here, this is like a very new issue for us. And, if you were around last fall and getting bit 10 times a day, I think there are a lot of complaints in our community. It was all over the news, too. Everybody was just like, what? There's mosquitoes. I know I don't usually get bit by mosquitoes. My dad's from Central America, and I go back. I never get bit by any mosquito there. But here in Las Vegas, I was getting 5 bites a day. So that's kind of how this conversation came to be. And I know that there's going to continue to be more conversation about that as a community over the next probably couple years as we really try to combat this issue that's really new to our part of the state. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us, to all the presenters. Thank you for making time for us today. And so at this time, we're going to go slightly out of order because I believe our next presenter has to leave in a little bit. But I want to make sure that we're still able to hear our presentation. So we're going to go ahead and jump ahead to agenda item number 7, which is the overview of recent activities of the Nevada Indian Commission. Executive Director Stacy Montooth, when you're ready, you may begin. Thank you. And welcome back.
For the record, I'm Stacy Montooth. I'm a citizen of the Walker River Paiute Nation, and I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Indian Commission. Please allow me to express my gratitude to Chair Torres, the entire Committee on Government Affairs, and the LCB staff for inviting me and allowing me to provide updates on our agency. I also should thank General for letting me sneak ahead. Thank you. As you will all likely remember, the charge of the Nevada Indian Commission, soon to be the Department of Native American Affairs, is to improve the quality of life for our tribal nations and urban Indians. We are the liaison to the governor's office. Basically, this is hard to do 2 things at once. I apologize. We are the liaison to the governor's office, and basically, when needed, we are the intermediary to all state services. So some quick facts here. The NIC has been around for about 60 years. We don't speak for, but we often speak with all of our 28 or one of our 28 tribal nations, our urban Indians communities, and those are the folks who choose to make Nevada their second home. My job is appointed, and we currently have a dynamic staff of 5. Our Native American creation stories teach us that our people have been in the Great Basin since time began. Our relatives include the Numa, the Nui, the Nuwu, the Washishu, and the Pipa-a-Makave people. That is There we go. That is the Northern Paiute, the Western Shoshone, the Southern Paiute, the Washoe, and the Fort Mojave people. Here is a look at our modern day land bases. Please know that in the indigenous culture, it's often frowned upon to brag. In our communities, standing out or being boastful is actually considered being disrespectful. So I'd like to be asked for, I'm going to ask for forgiveness for any of our elders who hear my words today and consider that I am bragging. Again, it's considered to be, it's something that we often are shunned for. So. There we go. However, since the conclusion of the historic 82nd legislative session, our tribal citizens have enjoyed several positive outcomes. Thanks to this body's work and the support of Governor Lombardo, every Native American, and that's per the last census, 80,000 people who are now celebrating new school construction, new job training, increased law enforcement measures for missing and murdered Indigenous peoples, more secure child welfare measures, significantly greater higher education opportunities, as well as the NIC becoming a standalone agency. Since June of 2023, we have surpassed the 14,000 person visitor mark at our Stewart Indian School Cultural Center and Museum. Just in the last quarter, we hosted 12 groups, including 251 students. They all learned the history of Indigenous boarding schools and how this federal policy still impacts Native Americans today. And again, thanks to your guidance, the Nevada Indian Commission has allocated over 16 of the $20 million in governor recovery funds that this body and Governor Lombardo entrusted to us to subgrant to our tribal nations. We have signed agreements with 26 out of 28 of our tribal nations. We've launched a civic engagement task force to address election services and legislative systems to support a statewide, nonpartisan ecosystem which focuses on Native American matters. We've enjoyed hosting U.S. Olympic gold medalist Billy Mills, who visited the Stewart campus to bring awareness to our loved ones who didn't survive Indian boarding schools. We provided feedback to U.S. Health and Human Secretary Becerras about the behavioral and mental health crisis on our reservations. We've made progress with the enforcement of the Native American Graves Protection Act, that's NAGPRA. We're working on branding and our IT solutions as we become our own agency. And moreover, we listen. I want to humbly share with you what we haven't done as well. We have not completed our strategic plan for the Native learners, as we are currently struggling with a 69.13% high school graduation rate. The rest of Nevada students are at 81.3%. We haven't completed our regulations regarding the treatment of sacred remains. These are those that are disturbed by industry or by accident. And we haven't expanded our staff despite funds to do so. However, as I often say, there's never been a better time to be Indigenous and live in the great state of Nevada. I promise we will continue to work hard every day to meet our mission and to meet our purpose. What questions may I answer?
Thank you. At this time, members, we'll go ahead and open it up to any questions. I'll go first to Assemblyman Gurr or Northern Nevada. Looks like we're good there. Members in Las Vegas, Assemblyman Carter.
Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned in one of the milestones is the expansion of waiver of fees. What types of fees and stuff, because I've talked to several members of the community, and, brought up the hunting and fishing licenses, and also the kind of convoluted process about getting the waiver to go to state parks. I'm wondering if there's been any work done in those areas.
Stacy Montooth for the record. Thank you for that question, and I apologize in advance. I didn't make myself clear. When I was talking in my presentation about a waiver of fees, I was specifically referring to NSHE. I was talking about the Native American fee waiver for our higher education institutions. I don't think it's top secret. NSHE reports annually, but we believe the number of Native learners who are taking advantage of that program is going to double since it was expanded through the last session. I would be happy to look into the current process for waiving of fees, that being an entrance fee or a licensing fee, entrance fee to state parks, and a licensing fee, hunting, fishing. Is that what I heard? My ancestors would be embarrassed, but I'm not a hunter. I'm a Aga Dukarai. That's a trout eater. I'm from Waka River. I don't fish either. But my relatives tell me you take your tribal ID when you go down to the Fish and Game offices to apply. I don't believe there's an online process yet. And then as regarding parks, I can tell you, when I pull up to meet the park rangers, I just show them my tribal ID, and I haven't had any issues. But I can get back to you about a formal process. Thank you for your question.
Senator Flores.
It's all good. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for your presentation. I know in opportunities that I've had a chance to work with some of our diverse communities, particularly Native communities, one of the conversations that we were talking about was pertaining to, and this happens in general, I think, with underrepresented communities across the board, where there's a disconnect between the institution, and I'm talking about NSHE here, and families. And sometimes it's because it's intimidating, right? You might be the first one in your family who's about to take that leap. Sometimes it's because even though there might be your cousin or somebody else in your family that's done it, you don't have somebody in your immediate family who can provide that kind of nexus. Here's what you do, staying in the dorms is fun, and it can be very intimidating. I know when we talk about NSHE, and this is a conversation that's been going on, I think now for at least 3 sessions, on how to bring the institution to the actual Native community. So right now, the traditional approach to systems of higher education is there's an institution, and then the human goes to them. Which I think statistically we know that underrepresented communities, because there's that disconnect, because there's that fear, because you might be the first one, and there's so many other scenarios that maybe after semester 1 they're just not ready to fulfill that, right? So I'm just curious to know where the conversations are today. I know some of our tribes have taken the initiative and provide some of the 101s within their specific tribes where there's a space there, and I believe Truckee Meadows has a program, if I'm not mistaken. But I am curious to know, just are we taking that conversation, expanding it further? Because now that we're waiving tuition and that we have the expectation of doubling the amount of students, now the question is, how do we ensure that we graduate them? There's no success in getting a student to enroll if we're only doing it for a semester or 2, which statistically we know often happens, particularly in underrepresented communities, but very specifically with our tribes. And it's for all the reasons we discussed. So I'm just curious to know if where those conversations are at now, how open have the institutions been to that, and if you could maybe just give us some knowledge there, please.
Stacy Montooth for the record. Thank you for that really insightful question. Like all things in Indian country, there's not one size fits all. There's not one solution to our complex problems. I'm going to try to give you three specific areas that I think address your question. If I'm not successful, I hope you'll let me know. So one of the great options with the fee waiver is that it isn't specific to traditional students, and when I mean traditional, I mean 18 to 22-year-olds. The fee waiver can be utilized for one class, it can be used for law school, any course of study, which is awesome. And we know from the Indian Education Advisory Committee that typically Native learners at the college level have a higher average age. Along with being a little older when you start college, sometimes also that brings other dynamics, including children, sometimes a couple of jobs. Having access to online learning could really be significant, and we've got a couple of pilot programs. However, we also have a couple of, I should say at least 12 situations where our tribal reservations, our communities just don't have access to stable broadband. And that's something that the Governor's Office of Information Technology, Science and Information Technology has really been addressing. Intertribal Council has got a consortium working together to try to increase all the aspects of not just online learning, but actually having what I consider a utility nowadays, right? Having the internet is just like having, water in your house to a certain extent. That's one way that we can approach at least the outreach. When we're talking about your idea about bringing learning to our communities, I think we have a bit of a solution that maybe is a compromise. This summer, there will be no less than 3 camps, very rigorous, very extensive camps for Native students between Southern Nevada and Northern Nevada. Both of these are being hosted and driven by our flagship universities, UNLV and Nevada, but these are specifically designed for Native learners. It brings in professionals from all aspects, from support services to social activities to, the basics in academic learning for a freshman. So there's a lot of services, and we anticipate having about 300 learners at the combined camps, one on campus and one at the University of Nevada, Tahoe area. Finally, if you'll pardon my editorializing, I think the ideal model for not just outreach, recruiting, retention, and providing those successful strategies to ensure that our students secure degrees has to do with having the resources on campus. And I think that the University of Nevada, Reno, starting an Office of Indigenous Relations is absolutely on the right path. That is, specific services that are available not just to the 300 plus students that are at that university, but for potential students, for the families. I know that the University of Nevada, Las Vegas has done research and is looking closely at that model, but based on what we know has worked at other higher education institutes in this country, that seems to be the magic sauce, if you will.
Madam Chair, if I could have one quick follow-up. And thank you for that. That sounds amazing. It sounds like we're moving in the right direction and that the bill is doing what it was supposed to do. Because we're always concerned that we move in that direction of just enrolling students but not graduating them. There are two different structures, there are two different agendas, and they fulfill two different, very different purposes. Switching gears, I know back in 2017, I recall having a conversation in our Government Affairs Committee about things that we can do as a state to just show that relationship with our Native community and the kind of that proud, rich history that we have. And I think one of the things that was mentioned, I remember back then, was having the flags of different tribes represented within the Nevada State Legislative Building, but also in our institutions of higher learning, UNR, UNLV, and some of our community colleges. Have we had that conversation move anywhere? Have we? I believe UNR, they have them, if I'm not mistaken. But I was just curious to know what's happening in the other, with the other folk in the other buildings.
Stacy Montooth, for the record. You and I did have that conversation. I believe it was actually before I had even started my state service, and I had the pleasure of still working for the Reno Sparks Indian Colony. I swear I'm not making this up. Just last Thursday, I got bids from the flag store in Reno for that very, very project. We're finally at a point where the Nevada Indian Commission, which, as you know, is housed at the historic Stewart Indian School, we're going to be able to purchase flags for a couple of different purposes, indoor meetings, but as well as to not just decorate, but to, show the civic pride of all of our tribal nations on that beautiful quad area. And so, not surprisingly, the more you order, the less expensive it is. And so I've already connected with our partners to see who's in. So thank you for that. And I will follow up with you and let you know who says they're in.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions? I did have a question because you had mentioned that the high school graduation rate was significantly lower for Indigenous students, and I wanted to know what we're doing as a state to address that issue, and then what work could be done as a state to address that issue.
Stacy Montooth, for the record. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. Boy, this is a tough one. Almost my entire life, I've been a believer that education is the great equalizer. That is our magic bullet. However, even before the pandemic, graduation rates, the success of Native learners in public education has always been behind every other subpopulation that the Nevada Department of Education tracks. I will tell you that just 3 weeks ago, the Nevada Indian Commission partnered with several different organizations, other state divisions and departments, including the Department of Education, the University of Nevada, UNLV. We had our annual Native American Indian Education Summit, and we shared all that data. We were really excited to have experts who have been contracted by the state to really dig into the data. And what we learned just a few weeks ago is it's connected to attendance. So in addition to these failing graduation rates, our Native learners have the highest dropout rates and have chronic absenteeism. And as I mentioned earlier, no one size fits all. There's a plethora of reasons for students not to attend school. I can tell you that along with the Nevada Department of Education, which is required to do a strategic plan every 5 years, the Nevada Indian Commission has the authority to create subcommittees. We have an Indian Education Committee, which will be reporting to the Nevada Indian Commission leadership next week about their recently concluded surveys that have been done. The idea was to hit 4 different stakeholders: college students, Native classroom teachers, community stakeholders, as well as folks who work for our tribal education departments. They work for the for tribal governments. So we're seeking their input on not just the biggest hurdles, possible solutions, but we're going to put all that information together to come up with our strategic plan that we want to fold in to meld with what the state's strategic plan is.
Thank you. Do you know when that plan is going to be developed or rolled out?
Stacy Montooth, for the record, we just closed the collection of surveys. I believe it was at the end of April. It's my understanding that it's possible, I'm not certain, that the organizers will be releasing some of that data on Monday at the Nevada Indian Commissioners Board of Meetings. So I can follow up with you and give you a timeline. Would that work?
That would be great. And then when you have the information for like whatever some of those results, but then also the findings from the summit that you held, I would love to have a conversation about that or see what that might look like so that we can work on something specific to address the graduation rate in that community. Thank you. Members, any additional questions? I don't believe that there are any additional questions at this time. Thank you, Ms. Montooth, for coming to present once again.
Thank you.
I think Assemblyman MacArthur wanted to come present. Go ahead. The floor is yours. He changed his mind. He said he would let General Barry do it. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the next item on our agenda today, the overview of recent activities of the Nevada National Guard. And today presenting will be Major General Andrea Barry, the Adjutant General of the Nevada National Guard, Office of the Military. Thank you. When you're ready, you may begin. And thank you for your patience.
Hear me okay? Okay. Good afternoon, Committee on Government Affairs, Madam Chair, Major General Andre Berry, Adjutant General for the Nevada National Guard. I'll just give you just an update and kind of talk about what we're looking at next and then open up for questions if that works. Okay. First of all, we have a new Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General C.Q. Brown, and one of the things he really talks about is our ability to work closely with our communities. And he talks about how critical that is. Now, we live in an extremely dangerous world, and I think everybody knows that the Guard has three roles. First of all, we do the war fight, then we have the homeland, then we have strong state partnerships. We have 3 state partnerships with Tonga, Fiji, and Samoa. And actually, there is a state partnership conference that's being held out at Lake Las Vegas. We were out there earlier today. But the strength of our military is the ability to have very strong partnerships with our community. So our work that we do in Nevada, the work we do with our legislators, the work we do with our community, it really matters. And one of our strategic priorities is care for airmen, soldiers, and their families and their employers. So I just want to kind of point out how critical it is. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to come here today just to give you a little bit of an update of who we are. Just as a reminder, first and foremost, the National Guard provides trained, ready, and resilient soldiers and airmen to protect the United States, its interests both domestically and abroad. And we add to that, our vision is really providing hope and service to our communities, states, and nations with safety, unity, and integrity. We put a lot into that as an organization. Just want to throw out just briefly what's going on today with your Nevada National Guard. Currently, we are posturing to send over 200 of our soldiers to deploy to the Middle East, going to the Kuwait. And this is probably the largest contingent of people we have sent, or soldiers we have sent overseas, probably in a long time. We just recently had approximately 25 of our soldiers return from Kuwait, but we went in conjunction with the California National Guard. To tie into what's going on in the state, and I know a lot of people ask me about how the Guard helps with things like fentanyl. We've had over 1 million drugs seized in the last 6 months through our counter drug, and this is through our state mission. And we've just, because of the efforts of especially of our CODELs, we've added 4 additional members to our counter drug team so we can put additional work, not just in terms of prevention and intervention, but we also can put them into schools. 3 major events, which I'm sure a lot of people hear about, that the Guard has supported, is the Super Bowl, which was right here in Las Vegas, F1 right here in Las Vegas, and New Year's Eve right here in Las Vegas. We love working state active duty assignments. And we are presently preparing for what we call the MAVS firefighting season, which is the Modular Airborne Firefighting System. That gives us the ability, when activated, to assist in fighting wildfires here in Nevada. We tend to spend most of our time over in California because we've been very safe in terms of firefighters over the last few years. And then our Star-based program, we have one in Henderson, and then we have one in Northern Nevada on our air base. Over 2,000 Nevada students have been served in this program. This is the STEM program for 5th graders that we bus them from their elementary schools to our site. And the Star-based Henderson site, we're actually expanding, adding another classroom. And we're hopeful, if we get federal funding, to add one to our Speedway Armory so we can service more of our students, our 5th graders. And then our high school, the Battleborn Youth Challenge Academy, I am missing a slide in here, so some of you are probably wondering what I'm talking about, so I apologize for that. But our Battleborn Youth Challenge Academy which is in Carlin, Nevada. We heavily encourage anybody that wants a student to go to high school that needs additional structure or credit recovery, or to get credits to recover to graduate from high school, to go to that academy. This slide you see up here right now is this is just the different statuses that we work as a Nevada National Guard. And when we talk about state active duty, when we talk about that, that's really what we're talking about. When you're activated for the F1 or the Super Bowl or New Year's Eve. When you talk about also state active duty statuses, all those on the right there with counter drug, civil support teams, Star-based, Youth Challenge, those are the programs that directly impact the citizens in the state of Nevada. And then when you see us when we're on Title 10, that's when they're getting deployed or when they're working up at National Guard Bureau. So those are the different statuses that we have. And Title 32 is what we work on a day-to-day basis. I always remind people this: in times of peace, we work for the governor. In times of war, we work for the President of the United States. So when they deploy, they're in a Title 10 status, working for the President. On the day-to-day, they're Title 32. And that was the slide I was just covering right there. Sorry, I got ahead of myself there. So I just want to kind of talk about, I was asked a question about, there was a recent article in the newspaper talking about what some of our efforts in terms of sexual assault, sexual harassment. And it is something we take extremely serious as an organization. And so if you see one of the things that we talk about, this is how I define culture, is what is the worst behavior that you will tolerate or accept as a leader in your organization. So if we turn our back on any service member, we betray them, and we don't tolerate those in our ranks who would bring harm to their brothers and sisters in arms. So when we talk about that, here's our way forward for us. First of all, we've had an increase in the Department of Public Health counselors. Over the last 2 sessions, you have given us mental health specialists. And this next upcoming session, I'll talk about what our ask will be. Also, Ms. Randall, who was our sexual assault response coordinator, she sits on the national committee, so we get direct responsibilities and updates and requirements from National Guard Bureau because of her efforts, very heavily engaged and involved. On a biannual basis, we put out a blotter report. And what this is for is to be very transparent to the entire force And we also send it to the governor's office, and I'd be glad to send it to anybody that'd like to have that, to show any misconduct and what the penalty was for that misconduct. We let people know that, let our soldiers and airmen know that if you do anything that goes against our policies, procedures, or laws, we will publish that and we'll make it available to anyone that wants to see that. Also, we have a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Public Safety. We do not do our own investigations. So if there's an allegation of a sexual assault or sexual harassment, we don't do those. We farm those out to the Department of Public Safety just to make sure that we stay objective. I have no input into their investigation. We just take the findings that come back and respond to those. We do partnerships with our Department of Public Safety. I have a very much an open door policy. If any soldier, airman, or civilian asks to come in and see me, they have the ability to come and do that. We do ask them to make sure that if they've exhausted talking to their respective chain of command. We have a comprehensive integrated primary prevention plan. There's 5 positions that we have from the federal government. We just acquired a position to get a lawyer, an additional lawyer to work with us. And they do regular assessments, and they're very much preventive and going out to the force. And recently we just did what we call our DEOC survey. So through the National Guard Bureau, through all the services, you're required to do a yearly survey to assess the climate of your force. And then based off of that, we have to develop responses to anything that comes out and how we will respond to it as a force. And then every senior leader signs that. And then every 3 months I look at to make sure that we have a good dashboard that holds us accountable to that. And then we have a monthly case management group that meets, that I lead those efforts, where we look at every single allegation of sexual assault or sexual harassment. Fortunately, over the last year, we've gotten to, this is my words, it's become one of the most boring meetings ever, because we've done a pretty good job of making sure that we've eliminated and been very assertive and aggressive about taking care of those items that could be tension for the force. And we also look at anything related to equal opportunity or any complaints that may come out of that. Something that we're really proud of is over the last 2 years, 30% of our recruits coming into the Nevada National Guard are now our female soldiers and airmen and civilians. So if you compare that to the rest of the nation, we're in the top 5 of that population coming in, which I think is a testament to some of the work that we've done and the trust and confidence we gain in that population. The next slide just is talking about, and this is where if as my grandmother used to say, if I had 10,000 tongues, I couldn't say thank you enough for the work that you've done in terms of how you supported the military and what you've provided for us in the ability to do our domestic and our global mission, and what you provided to our soldiers and airmen and civilians. So that's just my thank you slide in terms of what you've given us over the last session. And then the last slide here is just gives a recap in terms of what we have accomplished over the last 5 years. And here's probably the biggest things. If you look across the country and they ask, and you hear things like that recruiting is down in the military. We're in the top 5 in the nation of recruiting. If you look at retention, we're in the top 5 nation in retention. If you look at force structure, we're in the midst of negotiations of, without getting too public, of probably gaining force structure of almost 800 people. And then we just found out yesterday there's a potential to pick up another 50 positions. This is on the Army side for those positions. And yet we found out yesterday we have the potential to pick up another 50 positions. And then we just gained what's called a TAC-P unit that's going to be working out at Nellis. So we're a growth organization. We're from when they look at the health of the force, which is the integrated prevention positions responsible for that, we are very healthy as an organization. So I like to point out that when a lot of states the reason why we're able to gain more force structure is because some states cannot maintain some of their existing missions. Sorry, just have it. They can't maintain some of their existing missions, and so we're looking to grow. So if you ask us what will we look for the next session, I can tell you it's as simple as this: we're going to be looking for our capital improvement projects. in order for us to grow as an organization, our infrastructure has to grow, building facilities, improvements, because we're kind of busting at the seams now that we're bringing in additional force structure. And it's going to tie, the biggest thing is going to be our CIP projects. The other thing we're going to ask for is probably behavioral health. We're going to ask for 2 positions. We've quadrupled our positions as it relates to behavioral health over the last 4 years, but that is still an area that people are coming, they're asking for assistance. We encourage them to talk. We encourage them to seek help. We wanted to take away some of the misconceptions about what it means to seek help. If you think about it, you can literally be a 17-year-old going to a prom, going to playing soccer, doing all the things you do in high school, and a year later, you can be in the middle of a conflict somewhere overseas. And so to throw those pressures on young people, and we're a very young force, we want to make sure we have the resources that they have someone to go talk to. If you talk to our mental health specialists, they are not lacking for not having enough to do. So that's one of the things we'll talk about. We have a course that we created called Purple Resolve. It's a 2-day course where we really hit heavily on resiliency. We open it up to our service members. They can bring their spouses or family members to it. We encourage that. If anybody here would like to go, if you want a condensed course, we encourage that. We know that our GFO office will be our financial office will be going through the course with some of her people here pretty soon. And so we really, really open it up. That course has been adopted by about 10 states around the nation, to include the National Guard Bureau. But it was our way of looking at not just the skills and tools that our members learn, but the heart and mind. And we study very hard the ideations that people have as a result of some of the struggles they have in their life. We're also probably will be asking for additional cyber positions, because one of the things that we learned is that if you look at how wars are going to be fought in the future, all they got to do is take down our systems as opposed to coming and attacking us, and it throws everything off. We have a pretty good cyber force protection team that we've worked on now, and we're really ramping that up, but it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when that we get attacked, and you hear about it all the time throughout the nation. So we want to make sure that we put up better defenses, we get more preventive and more proactive. Not too long, something else we were asked for is not too long ago is that we had a soldier that was on state active duty that was working at a Battleborn Youth Challenge Academy. They got killed in an accident. What we learned, though, is your state active duty benefits as relates to workers' compensation and what your dependents can receive is not the same as you get on the federal level. So we're going to come and ask if we can match those benefits in the event that there's some serious injury or death that occurs while they're on state active duty. If you're not in a federal status, you don't get the same benefits if there's a death as you do in a state active duty status. So we're going to come and ask if we can match those federal benefits. That family is really struggling now. We've had a lot of help from agencies, but if it was equal right now, they wouldn't be going through some of those challenges. We're probably going to be also asking for an exception to the always having to go to Public Works to expedite when we have capital improvement projects. If we get the funding, is just being limited to working with them versus maybe possibly, especially if it's cost effective, going to the ability to go to a private contractor just to expedite our facilities being worked faster. And we've heard that's been done with other agencies. And keep in mind, you're probably going to see, if I had to guess, probably it's going to be between 15 and 20 capital improvement projects. And again, the reason why there will be asked is because of the enormous growth that we're having. I'm in the middle of the negotiations with California and then National Guard Bureau about how to acquire additional positions. Like I said, almost 800. But if they gave them to us today, we would not have anywhere to house them. So they would have to stay in place versus bringing them to Nevada. One of the things that I'm looking forward to for the next session is to bring to you the economic impact of your Nevada National Guard is tremendous. And as we were looking at what the growth does in terms of how we have an impact in our state in terms of the salaries, benefits, housing, et cetera, I think it was a big miss on our part. So I have to do better about educating this body about what we do and what we bring to the state. This is the last one I'll say real quick, is we're probably going to ask for a position, if we call it assistant adjutant general, which would be like assistant to me, but like in a state status. Why that's important is on a federal level, you can't work on things for the state. I can literally bring, and you can quote me on this, I could bring a military conference in here every month, which would have an impact to our state. But we don't have the resources to work on it. It's like we have a state partnership conference here. We held, over the last 3 years, we held 2 National Guard Association of the United States conferences here, which brought over 3,500 people. The Enlisted Association of the National Guards Conference is going to be coming here next year. But if I had a position, that would just be one of the responsibilities, to work on that with the convention authorities of the North and the South. We could bring military conferences here all day long. So we can be a force multiplier in areas that can really help our economy here. And then I said that was going to be the last thing, but I'm hoping that everybody got the newsletter we sent out. I'd like to send out once a quarter, just kind of give you everybody got this. I hope. Please tell me you got this. If you didn't, I know you get hundreds of emails, but we try to send out just a quarterly newsletter that is just kind of giving you an update. It's just a one-pager because I know you got a lot of things that you go through, just to kind of give you a status of how we're doing. And then we offer civic leader flights, which I don't know if I've seen all of y'all on them, where we ask you to come on one of our helicopters and just kind of see what we do. We like to show our mission. So I'm taking notes about if anybody wants to go, please let us know and we'll get it to you, because we just to go and see the Valley. They love to talk about what they do and show you what they do. These are people who are, we like to say, battle-born, battle-tested, battle-ready, and like to show you that not only can we take care of the homeland, but these are people who go downrange and take care of this great nation. You cannot have a great nation unless you have a great military. Impossible. And as you look at what's going on in the world today, it is critical that we do everything we can to ensure these soldiers, airmen, and civilians are ready in case anything comes up. That's why we use always ready, always there. Thank you, and I stand by for your questions.
Thank you. At this time, I will go ahead and open it for questions. Do you have any questions in Northern Nevada?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Go ahead.
And thank you for the presentation, General Berry. One of my questions, and maybe it's from my lack of knowledge on that, if we could go back to the slide you had on National Guard active status, so you have the state active duty, Title 32, Title 10. And I just wanted to understand a little bit better on the hierarchy, the state versus federal hierarchy / jurisdictions. And I know, you're on active duty, I believe, with the federal government, so that's where your pay comes from, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. And you were talking about having a potential state-paid assistant. Could you explain a little bit on the separation there? Because I know when I look at the Constitution of the state, I believe it's Article 5, subsection 5, it says the governor shall be the commander-in-chief of the military forces of the state, except when they shall be called into the service of the United States. So answer that, explain that a little bit. I may have a follow-up.
Yes. Major General Andre Berry, Adjutant General, First State of Nevada. If you look at our soldiers and airmen, and then I am the only state employee. I'm the only state employee. And the majority of them are on what's called Title 32, so their pay comes from the federal government. But the governor is the commander-in-chief, but they they shouldn't do state missions, which is why when you look at that, and I can take you back to the ones in the blue there on the right, that those are the state missions that we work on a daily basis. Counter Drug Task Force, even though their salary is covered by federal, the Civil Support Team, they work a state mission. Starbase, now that's 100% federally funded, but they're state employees. Youth Challenge, you pay a 25%, 75% match. So 75% from the feds, 25% from the state. Defense, DISCA, that's more tied into the Department of Emergency Management. But when they go to the Super Bowl, F1, and New Year's Eve, we put them on state active duty. Then that comes out of the state coffers. The state pays for those. So the majority of time, our people are on Title 32. If they're activated for a federal mission, then they're on Title 10. But again, both of those are paid by the federal government, which is, if you're paying attention to what's going on in the nation today in terms of, I would say border security, or when legislatures want to put together laws determining when our military members can be activated, you have to be really careful of that, because that comes out of the federal funds. I mean, if you look at our airplanes, our helicopters, all of equipment, all that's paid for by the feds. Now, if you look on the Army, all the armories are on state land, except for on the air side, but on the Army side, it's all state land. So it gets that's why I have to be very careful about, if a soldier or airman does something, then I have to ensure I look at their status, because they have different rights. One of the things I don't put on here, is not on here, is Title V, and those are people in plain clothes, but again, federally funded. So if the governor would say, let's say civil unrest, and they need the guard support to support Las Vegas Metro, Reno Police, they would be on state active duty, and that's funded by the state. But the majority of the time, when you see people in uniform, they're on Title 32, being paid for by the feds. And when I leave the state, I'm in a federal status, but my salary, my day-to-day salary, is covered by the state. When I go out of the state, it's my federal salary. I'm the only uniform person, which is why I asked for that position, because they can't do certain state responsibilities because of their status. I hope that makes sense.
It does, and I do have a follow-up, and I do remember the bill from last session where we changed that, and I'm sorry I had it backward, so it gives you more flexibility to be on the state. When you're out of state, then you revert to the other, so it gives you that status. No, it's just, and thank you for the explanation on the state active duty, and then where the money comes from, and then what some of those types of things are. And I think I read in one of the slides, if there's declared an active disaster or whatever, then you would be eligible for some of the federal funds to reimburse that. But it would have to be declared on that. And I do pay attention and listen to what going on across the country, and border security and the various things, and the Idaho governor, I guess, send some of the National Guard for Idaho down to Texas, and I'm not exactly sure how that is, but that would be all state funded, and I think
Exactly.
it's kind of I think one of the things that might have held us back when they said, "Oh, we don't have the money for that," because I know our current governor signed on in support of what Governor Abbott's doing in Texas, and it's just a sad state of affairs when we would have that conflict. So I was trying to get the hierarchy and understand where the funding comes from, and where some of the bottlenecks come in on responsibilities for that. And then, if I can, Madam Chair, just to comment on one of the questions or legislation that you might have been thinking about on your public works and various things. I've heard a lot of complaints over the years about the State Public Works Board, although they do fine work. But the only one that I'm aware of that doesn't use state public works for their buildings and various things is the Nevada System of Higher Education. But they have a whole department that does the design and does the procurement and all that stuff. I don't know if you have that. But the other thing on the other side, I don't think you'd have an issue with that, is the only thing State Public Works then does at the end is they're the building official for the job, so they're the ones that issue the final C of O, certificate of occupancy. And but I don't know if you have the infrastructure like the university system does to procure and design and do all of the other things. So just FYI, I'm sure we'll see a bill next session.
Again, Major General Andre Berry, we do have a pretty good staff, FMNO staff and our concern is that, and let me tell you this, our working with them has gotten really much better. So it's not as a complaint, but when we get so many federal funds and we're trying to execute on those funds in a timely manner, that's one of the things we want to look at. And it should be more of a secondary versus the primary. I mean, if the State Public Works can't or doesn't have the ability to do it, so that's what we would ask. And so because they should be the primary organization that we work with.
Understood. And then when we had the same thing with the university, they said, hey, we don't want to be underneath them. And there was a compromise that was made, but State Public Works insisted, and I agree, that they should just remain as the building official for state buildings, and they were cool with that, and I'm sure we'll be able to work something out. Anyway, I just wanted to understand that hierarchy, state versus federal, and then what can and should and shouldn't be done. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Confuses me too. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblyman Gerd, did you have a question? Okay, thank you. And then I'll go down here to Assemblyman De Silva.
Thank you, Chair. General, it's always good seeing you, sir. I had a two-part question. One, you were mentioning these hosting military conferences here in Las Vegas. I was wondering if you could give us like a overview as to what types of conferences, maybe military, civil affairs, what types of conferences do you think would be appropriate for us to host here in Vegas, which I think is a great idea. And then secondly, I also had a question about the size of the Guard, the Air National Guard as well as the Army National Guard, and how we're doing with recruitment. Are there any issues there with recruitment, retention, so on and so forth?
Thank you. Again, Major General Andre Berry, Nevada National Guard. There are over 1,000 military organizations in the nation today, and we have discovered that they like to come to Nevada, but the infrastructure isn't there to support them. They always want to work with military, not always, but many times want to work with a military organization. So if you look at, when I was doing the research on this, I looked at the top 20 military organizations in the country, and this ties to, National Guard Association United States. I'm just talking about the Guard right now. Enlisted Association, the Military Officers Association, Army Association of the United States. When you start looking at those organizations, they have said that they would love to come here and do business with Nevada. But again, and it doesn't take away from someone who's a civilian or who may not have as much knowledge, but you can easily expedite some of the logistics of knowing the types of things that they like to have here. So when we took on the NAUGUS conference in 2021 in 3 months, because at that time, as we're kind of going through the ends of COVID, North Carolina would not do it. The governor wouldn't allow it. So we have the infrastructure. We worked with the Mandalay Bay. They immediately got us the rooms. They work with the discounts. They have convention departments. They can take on large organizations. So when I go back and look at those organizations that have, at least 5,000 members or more, it is endless. And when we put out when I first initially started looking at this, kind of sent out a survey, and from retired organizations, from veteran organizations, from the officers organizations, from enlisted organizations, from veteran support organizations, that they just love Nevada because it's an easy use. And then the things that they pay the most attention to, of course, are hotel fees, accessibility to airlines. Do you have the infrastructure to handle, like, you can literally bring tanks into here, into our facilities. You can bring helicopters into our facilities. You can bring trucks into our facilities. And literally the only The only ones that we would be competing with that gets more military conferences right now was Orlando. So when I was like, we're just leaving money on the table, I literally would get calls at least once or twice a month asking would we be interested. And of course I say no, because I just don't have the support, and I refer them to the convention authorities. But if we had a military person that could be the technical expert and work with them and make it more seamless in terms of, going back to things like flags and protocol and having color guard or honor guard, all those things that we do as a military, but somebody has to have that checklist to work through, it would be very easy. And then going back to, so let me just say this. If you had one military conference that came in here, that would pay for the position. Just one of 1,500 people. That is like a no-brainer in terms of making it happen. And then going back to your second question, currently you have approximately 3,500 people in the Nevada Army National Guard. You got about 1,300 in Nevada Air National Guard. And we believe we're very much on the way. We're projected to get over the next year approximately 800 individuals, to include the Army and the Air. And all we're doing now is going through the negotiations and paperwork, and myself working with National Guard Bureau, working with our Land Component Commander. And the one place that we've been asked to do more at, just 2 days ago, I was talking to the Director of the Air National Guard, General Lowe. So they're giving us some additional force structure to work on Nellis, who will be guardsmen, and they want us to take on more missions. But again, it always starts off with making sure you have the infrastructure, you have the places, because every time you start hiring more, then you got to think about all the support personnel and then where you're going to put them. So we're a growth state. And going back to your question about recruiting, we have no struggles with recruiting. Zero. We have none. We do very well with recruiting in Nevada. So whatever you're seeing out there, that is not happening here. So we have the ability to, if we get these missions, to fulfill them. Of course, then you're probably going to get some individuals that would come over from the states that you acquire the force structure from, but we can recruit. I told the Director of the Air National Guard just a couple days ago, I said I could recruit a wing, which is over 1,000 people down in Southern Nevada, if you gave me the force structure. So if you feel free to reach out to them, they know we are a growth state, and also when they going back to your question, when they look at where they will place force structure, they look at the health of an organization, which is why I talked about some of the things in here. They look at recruiting, they look at retention, they look at your readiness, they look at, complaints, they look if you have facilities. So we're very healthy as an organization, but the goal is that we get additional MILCON or additional money from the feds to build these facilities, because it can't just be, we can't come and ask you to build us a whole new armory. We're asked to be moved up the MILCON list, so they would provide the funding for us. One of the things, again, I got to say another thank you is, we're trying to acquire C-130Js, the newest C-130s in our wing up north. And just last Friday, Interim Finance Committee gave us $850,000 for the design to expand the ramp. And so I'm able to go to National Guard Bureau and say, the state is playing its part in supporting our growth, and so we're competing against 3 other states to get that modernization. It will be huge for us as a state if we were able to do that. So again, I say thank you that the state has really stepped up to support us, so we're able to get that to show the value that the state places in its military. I can talk about this stuff all day.
Thank you. That does suffice. Thank you again. And again, thank you for your hard work and dedication to the state, General. You really are an inspiration. I have further questions, but I'll get with you offline about that.
Right.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions? I wanted to specifically ask about the workers' comp issue that you had mentioned kind of as, I think you kind of listed a whole bunch of like, these are the things that we want to see fixed. So if you could talk a little bit more to that workers' comp issue. So as I understand it, then if they're working on state money, and so maybe they're working on New Year's Eve on the Las Vegas Strip, then they're going to get one rate. But then if they are working, if they're deployed or some other type of service under Title 32, Title 10, then there's different rates. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Here's an example. Major General Andre Berry, Nevada National Guard, Adjutant General. If you have a death on active duty, all of the federal benefits, first of all, you get the SGLI, which is the like $500,000. You got, lifetime medical, you got lifetime benefits, your kids, get the benefits. But on the state side, on workers' compensation, matter of fact, the widow of the soldier that passed was getting so much of the runaround saying you don't qualify for workers' compensation. That's not a part of the death benefit. We will review it. So we just had some of our people sit down with her just this weekend to fill out paperwork because you don't meet the same qualifications. You're completely taken care of on active duty. On state active duty, you're not, because you just don't have the same safeguards. And we think a big part of it is that nobody's really looked at it and sat down and did a side-by-side comparison. So we're going to ask for that to happen this time and then come and show you the numbers. And someone asked me this question. They said, how often do you have a death on state active duty? I can't remember, or we've had one. I ain't say we haven't, but I can't remember. It just doesn't happen. The more the liability tends to be when you're in the Title 10 status, and you're downrange and when we have accidents and things like that. So I think it's something that is well overdue. And we're also looking at what's going on around the nation with the other 53 states, territories, and district in terms of what they do. And what we have discovered is they work very hard to match the federal. So I think it's just something that hasn't really been looked at. So that's why you don't have the same degree of benefits. Because one of the things that we see in a lot of states is your dependents. They get college taken care of. They have health care for the rest of their lives. I mean, till they're, I think, 18 or graduate from college. They make sure that there's they get the compensation check. So whatever that person was making while on state active duty, they still receive a percentage of that, which tends to happen in some workman comp injuries. So those types of things are not in place right now. So we're just looking at how we can make it equal to federal.
Thank you. And is then there's something specifically in statute that would have to be added just kind of for that clarity so that those rights could then be expanded, that compensation. Right. And then are benefits like the college and stuff like it and the healthcare, are those already included or no, those two would have to be added?
I don't think they're included right now, no.
Okay. That's interesting. Thank you. I appreciate it. And, I hope, as we're looking at legislation, then that we would put it into place to allow for, for specifically, like I think about, young kids of people that maybe have passed under this old law, we would have to put some type of exemption so that they could receive these benefits until they're 18 and then obviously the free college too. So I look forward to continuing that conversation, working with you all on that. I don't see any additional questions here. All right, then we're ready to move on. Thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate it.
And thank you all so much for your support. It's really, really, I brag about this all the time that, this is a very pro-military state and you do so much for us. And I just, on behalf of our 4,800 people, we just say thank you, 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 thank you. So.
Thank you. And at this time, we'll go ahead and move on to agenda item number 6, which is a presentation on emergency management activities in Nevada. So Deputy Administrator Luce, when you're ready, please begin.
Sharon Luce, Deputy Administrator for the Nevada Division of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. Thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity. Also, the rest of the Committee on Government Affairs for the opportunity to speak on our mission and activities when it relates to emergency management in the state of Nevada. So our mission is the coordination, the prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery programs and resources through partnerships to build resilient communities for Nevada's residents and visitors. And what that means is you have your local public safety and first responders that are responding every day to emergencies, but there are going to be emergencies that exceed their capability to respond at their level. And at that point, we are the structure and the entity that they would contact in order to get more assistance, whether it's during a response, but also in the preparedness efforts prior to a response. And so that's a huge part of what we're doing. And we work with those partners to achieve our vision of building a resilience through coordination and partnerships using our values of stewardship, integrity, innovation, collaboration, and teamwork. Our division goals are to actively cultivate a diverse and professional emergency management workforce who embodies integrity, collaboration, and innovation, to strengthen Nevada by supporting the development and improvement of capabilities, capacities, and communications, and to lead and coordinate the equitable delivery of emergency management resources and services to the whole community. Our organization currently has about 40 full-time state employees, 10 contract employees, and 1 federal emergency management agency, what we call a federal integration team leader, that is embedded and co-located with us in our Nevada Operations Center in Carson City. That Nevada Operations Center is our headquarters, but we also have a Southern Nevada office here in Las Vegas. And we are a component of the Office of the Military. So you just spoke to General Barry. He's the Adjutant General. Our division administrator and Homeland Security Chief by Nevada Revised Statute is David Fogerson. On my side, as the Deputy Administrator and Deputy Homeland Security Chief, I have what's called our Access and Functional Needs Program, our Preparedness and Operations section, and our Mission Support section. And most of what we do from an operational perspective is to provide information sharing on best practices with our local jurisdictions, as well as private entities, non-government organizations, volunteers, in our efforts to improve community preparedness. In our preparedness efforts, we have our training and exercise program, our emergency planning program, a hazard mitigation program, and a resources program that includes tribal liaison officers and a rural and frontier program so that we can perform outreach and technical assistance with our rural partners. Mission support includes our public information and affairs, as well as our new 911 coordinator that I'm going to go into a little bit more detail later, and our communications and IT program. And all these things work together to support our local entities. If they do get a response that overwhelms them, we have structures and capability to support through our Nevada Operations Center. We also have a finance section that is headed by our Administrative Services Officer 3, who acts as our Chief Finance Officer. We have our grants manager, and we have 2 types of grant programs. We have recurring grant programs that are used in the preparedness side of things, where we are the primary recipient and the local entities are subrecipients. Also under grants are our recovery grant programs and our mitigation grant programs. So if there was a presidentially declared disaster, those recovery grant and mitigation grant programs become available, and we administer those programs. And then, of course, we also have our fiscal and administrative services that help keep our organization running. We have a few public bodies. Government-led is the Commission on Homeland Security and the Committee on Finance. When we have much of these grant programs, especially our Homeland Security Grant Program, which includes our state Homeland Security Grant Program from the federal government and the Urban Area Security Initiative, those projects are brought forward to these commissions and approved. And a lot of those projects fund things just like our Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and their capabilities for counterterrorism, for hardening hardening areas with more presence. We have our Las Vegas Fire Rescue, who also has capability with their federally recognized bomb intervention team. And many other projects that help us secure and protect our homeland that funnel through this committee for approval. We also have a governor-developed task force, the Cybersecurity Task Force, which is relatively new, and that's so we can take advantage of a state and local cybersecurity grant program that includes pass-through through local governments to help them bolster their cyber defense capabilities, as well as helping us with our state agencies with similar projects that would help us with our cyber defense at a state level. And then by Nevada revised statute, we have the Nevada Resiliency Advisory Committee, our Nevada Tribal Emergency Coordinating Council, our State Disaster Identification Coordination Committee, our Nevada Interstate Mutual Aid Committee, and the State Search and Rescue Board. And again, much of this is just to help coordinate amongst our local jurisdictions and find some ways that we can leverage the grant funding in a way that helps build capacity for emergency and disaster response. We also have two other groups, the Emergency Preparedness Working Group and the Hazard Mitigation Working Group, that are at the power of the administrator or the chief of our division, where we engage in a lot of information sharing and technical assistance to help programs build their capacities. Our threats, hazards, and our annual focus currently, as it stands right now, cybersecurity, election integrity, earthquake, wildland fire, flood, winter storms, pandemics, domestic violent extremism, criminal active shooter events. Those have come up quite a bit. We do an annual threat hazard identification and risk assessment, and then something called a stakeholder preparedness review, where we contextualize these threats and hazards to our state as well as our local jurisdictions, and then we identify the capability to respond to, recover, mitigate, protect, prevent those threats and hazards from hurting us here. And so these are the threats and hazards that have come up most recently as our priority areas to coordinate and work with our local entities to try and bring down those risks and vulnerabilities to our community. Our annual focus coming out of that process for 2024 is critical transportation, which includes infrastructure and evacuation, as well as access control and identification verification. This is where we have responders that need to enter an area, potentially a mass casualty event or any other law enforcement response, where they might be in plain clothes and they need to get to the scene. And so we have this access control and identification focus that we're trying to improve throughout the state. And then as well as our overall operational coordination for response and recovery from the local level, the state level, and the federal government, when the Federal Emergency Management Agency also becomes involved in any of our response or recovery efforts. In the past, we've continued to also bolster operational coordination, operational communication, supply chain intelligence, or supply chain integrity, cyber effects, fatality management, health and social services, and disaster housing. So those are just the things that year over year, as we go through these threat assessments, we identify some opportunities for us to work with our local partners to build some capability. So all incidents are locally executed, state guided, and federally supported. And it is an entire enterprise between the local level, the state level, and the federal level. As I mentioned earlier, our local first responders and every county is responsible for trying to use the resources that they have available through mutual aid or by making their own direct purchases and hiring whatever resource or staff, personnel, equipment that they're looking for. But when something becomes overwhelming for them, they'll contact us. And we act as a coordinating structure within the state to get them additional resources from other neighboring counties through our intrastate mutual aid assistance program. But if it gets to a presidential federal declaration, then we'll be working with our Federal Emergency Management Agency and helping the locals understand all those various requirements and things that are a part of funding from a federal government perspective. And for an entity like Clark County, where it's an urban area, there's a lot of subject matter expertise when it comes to, disaster and emergency management. But when you get into your rural communities, some of those emergency managers, don't really quite have the background in this. And so we, as the state, provide them with technical assistance and advice to help them get through that process if we should, identify resources that they might need, or if it does get to a presidential declaration status, to help them navigate that bureaucratic system with the federal government. So that's why we are a guide to the local entities. So some state-guided missions and activities that we've been responsible for. In last year, 2023, we had our atmospheric river in northern Nevada, which resulted in a winter storm and power outages. We had a second atmospheric river in March. That was actually a presidential disaster declaration. So we did have to assist our Eureka County, Lyon County primarily, and some other northern Nevada counties with their coordination with the federal government for, flood management, things like sandbags and high clearance vehicles and roads that got washed away that needed to be rebuilt. We had a State Route 208 rock slide. We had spring thaw activities after all of the historic snow that packed on the Sierra Mountains. It has to go somewhere at some point. And so as it warms up in the summer, it started to impact our communities as well. We had a Hurricane Hillary response, which was a new thing for us. We don't typically, in the state of Nevada, being landlocked in, anticipate, and it doesn't come up in our threat assessment, that we would have to prepare for a hurricane. But that's something new that we took on last year, and that impacted Clark County. Primarily the community in Mount Charleston was impacted by this. And then, of course, Formula One, Las Vegas Grand Prix, the Super Bowl event this year, and New Year's Eve are all other missions that we support. And so General Berry gave an overview of the state active duty assignments, things like the civil support team, and other activities that are being done to support our local law enforcement. We are a coordinating structure that gets to the National Guard and deploying and supporting those events. We get a request from the county emergency manager asking for a specific capability for these events. And then, we source that. And, most of the time, sourcing it when it comes to New Year's Eve and the civil support team has gone to the National Guard. And that was just 2023. So you can see that was a really busy year last year. And there are other things that we coordinated that didn't reach the level of our Operations Center activation. In prior years, of course, we had COVID-19, which is a pretty significant coordination effort that we had. We had wildfires in Pineview, Tamarack, and Caldor, as well as civil unrest for elections, vaccine, and a fuel supply concern coming out of Long Beach, where we had to prepare for the possibility of needing to put some type of fuel supply program and some security around gas stations and things like that, as well as making sure our first responders had some fuel as well. And then earthquake is always a top concern. There was an earthquake prior that affected Nye County and caused some damages and things like that. Outside of a mission, I mentioned the threat hazard identification risk assessment process, which really sets the tone for everything that we do because it helps us identify, where we need to focus our efforts. It also helps us identify the training that's needed. So we have a state training officer that is able to administer training programs from the Federal Emergency Management Agency that our local first responders need. Things like the Incident Command System and National Incident Management System that our fire, our police, and also our public health preparedness partners utilize on a day-to-day basis to coordinate these large, massive responses to emergencies, especially when those emergencies cross over jurisdictional lines and include agencies that you don't typically work with from a day-to-day basis. And so it gives them the ability to access those training classes through our state training officer. We also provide Homeland Security, emergency management, hazard mitigation, and post-disaster recovery grant funding, as I mentioned, which is just to identify, many ways where we can hopefully prevent, protect, or mitigate against a disaster to begin with. So when it comes to a response or recovery, we're more capable of overcoming any of those challenges that may come. Some examples of what we do. So in that case of the county emergency manager needing to request assistance because they need some type of resource, we have our 24-hour duty officer program. That's who they would contact, and it's the first line of notification for an incident as well that may potentially be of interest to the governor or may potentially require us to coordinate resources. Many of the calls that we get that may not be well known is coordinating for search and rescue assistance. So we have our state search and rescue coordinator, and we identify, who might have a helicopter that has a hoist, whether it's a state agency like Nevada Division of Forestry that has that capability, the National Guard, or it could be a local entity like Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department that might be able to provide that. And so we are involved quite a bit in calls when it comes to search and rescue. We also have to make notifications for hazardous materials, any type of spills or releases or potential releases if we're not sure. And then any interstate or intrastate mutual aid, except for wildfire, we would get involved in. So if there's a flood event and they need sandbags or sand or, like I said, high clearance vehicles to be able to cross roads, then we would use those mutual aid programs to try and source that for the local entity. The Nevada Operations Center becomes active when the lone duty officer exceeds their capability as one person to coordinate all of these resources, because we do a lot of calls. If it's a really complex emergency, they might be asking for a lot of different things that are coming from a lot of different directions. And so they coordinate with those local entities to identify what they need, and the logistics to getting it from point A to point B. So it's great that we found something, maybe another county has it, but we have to figure out how to get from that other county to somewhere elsewhere in the state. And that could become challenging too when you have really remote rural communities when it comes to trying to identify the logistics of getting something to and from. And of course, if the federal government is activated, the Nevada Operations Center is where we would be co-located and working with our federal government partners in FEMA to coordinate resources from the federal level down to the local level. We are, by NRS, required to stand up a incident management assistance team. We have one that's been pretty active here in Southern Nevada, and we are working on the credentialing and training to stand up an entire team in Northern Nevada. But what they do is, again, for those rural communities that don't have the expertise to handle these emergencies on their own, we can provide some assistance to them by sending a team. And these team members can be division division full-time employees, but it could also be partners from local entities that go through the process of being qualified and credentialed with our national qualification system to be able to respond. We also manage interoperable communications. We have something called the NCORE system, which is a fallback. So if any of the local communication systems go out, they have access to this statewide radio system where they can still communicate with one another. We also manage radiological readiness, including the waste isolation pilot plant, and we purchase equipment for calibration of that hazardous waste, as well as provide specialized training to local responders on how to use the equipment and respond to radiological waste issues. We also, as I mentioned in our preparedness section, have tribal emergency management liaisons. They would work with, the Nevada Indian Commission or the Interstate Tribal Commission of Nevada to identify tribal needs when it comes to emergency preparedness, whether it's help with the plan or getting them the incident command system training or helping them do a exercise of some sort. And also the Federal Emergency Management Agency has a tribal liaison that's assigned to our state. We currently don't have that position we have the position funded through the federal government, but we don't have the position in-house yet, as we had somebody that was there and left, and so we're currently recruiting for that FEMA position. But it really helps because the tribes can either go directly to the local county for assistance, or they can go to the state, or they can go to the federal government. So being able to communicate and coordinate and identify who's going to try to meet the needs of our tribal partners is really important to us. We also have a drought response committee and planning, training, and exercising for healthcare and our emergency managers. And then I've talked about the grant programs quite a bit, but again, we try to have a coordinated effort so that way we're looking at things from a regional level for Southern Nevada, Western Nevada, Eastern Nevada, and what could be shareable amongst different counties and different responder agencies, so that way the grant funding helps actually close any type of gaps or challenges that we're having with assisting in any type of emergency. And then one of our newer programs is a access and functional needs program. And basically, just to dispel what this is that every Nevadan has needs for communication, needs for maintaining their health, needs for independent, for support and safety, and for transportation. And so the Access and Functional Needs Coordinator that we have identifies ways in which we could meet the needs of all Nevadans through plan development, through training and exercises, through advice on, different equipment that might help different people. One of the things that we highlight as an example of how we would use access and functional needs is, let's say you have a shelter and you add a wheelchair ramp to that shelter to make it accessible. Well, that wheelchair ramp not only benefits wheelchair users, but it benefits a family with a stroller that needs to access that shelter. It benefits me as a normal person if I come in with a rolling luggage or anything that's on wheels now are accessible to that shelter. And so this person tries to find those kind of cross-cutting opportunities that benefit more people by having some type of accessibility put in place. They work with the Governor's Council on Developmental Disabilities to do some outreach and have met with the county emergency managers to raise awareness on some opportunities that they could use that might cost very minimal money to them, things like, paper signs and whatnot, that they can implement really readily and quickly that would make their services when it comes to an emergency more accessible. And then lastly, I was asked to present some best practices on statewide 911. And before I can present some best practices, I just want to highlight the current state, the current challenges. We We got our first statewide 911 coordinator earlier this year, but we have a number of public safety answering points like Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, the Combined Communications Center that services Las Vegas Fire Rescue, Clark County Fire Department, North Las Vegas Fire Department. We have Henderson, which has a communications center that covers both their police, fire, and EMS. And then in northern Nevada, we have Douglas County, Reno, and the rural counties typically have, a really small group of people that are public safety answering point specialists. And so prior to getting someone in place to try and identify best practices, what happens is those entities, they have challenges because they adopt their own computer-aided dispatch systems, or they get their own phone systems and call management systems. Some of them might not be able to get call management systems because in rural communities, they might not have access to broadband. And so they have really, archaic manual processes of still keeping track of all the calls that are coming into their counties. Another challenge is there's a lot of staffing shortages, not just in our urban areas, but it's difficult to get someone trained in rural communities as well. And there's a variability in agency procedures for how they take calls or dispatch calls. There are professional programs and standards that are out there, but not every agency in the state adopts these standards and puts them into their procedures. And another big challenge is whether or not these programs have a 311 non-emergency line, because if they don't, then every call is going to go into 911. So if you have, one single dispatcher in one rural community, that's going to be a lot on that person to have to triage those calls. And then those entities that do have 311 and 911, another challenge that they encounter is they can't transfer the call from a 311 line to a 911 line or a 911 line to a 311 line. And so with how some of these stations are set up, that workstation might only be set up to do a 911 call and not a 311 call, and vice versa. So it creates some challenges internally within those organizations with trying to manage these calls and keep up with the call volume in a way that efficiently gets whatever resources are needed to the community at large. And so these inefficiencies have really highly affected response times and citizen safety. And so our statewide 911 coordinator is kind of hitting the ground running first by building some relationships with all of the counties, as well as all the public safety answering points that exist in those counties, and trying to establish an understanding of the systems, so taking an inventory of the different systems that they're using for their communications, and also an inventory of the policies, procedures, and protocols that they're using when it comes to call taking or dispatching calls. And then from there, trying to build some best practices that they could use across the state. And advocating for next generation 911 where the technology is there for broadband, where they can have pictures and text 911. They can use AI to augment calls, especially in those rural communities. Like I said, where you have one person, the AI can help triage and figure out if it's a non-emergency versus an emergency, and it'll just kind of help with the call management and the priority assignment. And so those are some of the things that we're doing. And then from there, kind of understanding, like we do with the threat hazard assessment, understanding the shortfalls and the gaps, and then helping them either through planning or training or exercise efforts, but also through advice on funding and coordination of funding, some opportunities for them to seek grant programs. There are 911 federal grant programs available, but we do have to get to a point where the statewide 911 coordinator is qualified and certified first and registered, and then try to pursue those grant programs. So we're a bit ways away from actually being able to meet that, as well as understanding whatever else is in those federal notice of funding opportunities, because we've never had this position before. We've never been able to see, what could be taken advantage of through those federal grants. And so that is overall my presentation. One thing I do want to welcome is, at any point in time, if anybody would like to visit us, whether at our Nevada Operations Center or down here in our Southern Nevada operations, I welcome that. We can have some more conversations and talk a little bit more in detail about some of the challenges and whatnot that we experience, as well as some opportunities. But that will conclude my presentation. I'm open to questions at this time.
Thank you. I'll go first to Northern Nevada, see if there's any questions. Assemblyman Gurr or Assemblyman Daly? Doesn't appear that there are any members here in Las Vegas. Assemblyman De Silva.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just had a quick question about some of those urban security grants that the federal government has been doling out to the states. I was wondering if you were able to utilize any of those through your office, and if there was any ongoing efforts to maybe retrieve more of those grants.
Sure. Sharon Luce, Deputy Administrator, Nevada Division of Emergency Management. So the Urban Area Security Initiative is specific to the urban area of Clark County. And so that entity is able to, access those grants. And it's represented by the Urban Area Working Group, which has, your North Las Vegas Fire, city marshals, your county emergency management and fire department, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, Las Vegas Office of Emergency Management, all of those various entities, City of Mesquite as well, Henderson as well. And so those cities that are within Clark County can take advantage of that particular grant program. That falls under the umbrella of the Homeland Security Grant Program. And so there's the urban area pot of money, and then there's the state Homeland Security Grant Program, which can be used outside of Clark County for similar initiatives. Does that help? Mm-hmm.
Members, any additional questions? Assemblyman MacArthur? Oh, I think Assemblyman De Silva better stole it from him. I did have one question regarding 911, the statewide 911, because it's a conversation we've had in this committee before and that I've had with several of the law enforcement agencies, and they actually didn't bring this up at all. But I had asked about what we were doing with 911, because we know that we've had several issues throughout the state with 911 systems being just inundated with calls when there is an emergency, and those lines not being able to respond, individuals not being able to respond quickly enough, because, there's so many calls, and, there's other emergencies going on at the same time. And so things fall through the cracks, or you have a long wait time, which causes another issue, and can sometimes have the cost of life. So can you talk a little bit just about where we're at? So it seems like we're started in initiating the conversation about that. And so what does it look like, or what's the timeline to implementing it? And then how can the legislature be supportive of the efforts? It seems like supporting the funding for the next generation 911 tech is part of that.
Sure. Sharon Luce, Nevada Division of Emergency Management, Homeland Security. So yes, we are at the very beginning stages, and it first starts with building those relationships, and that takes time, especially because we have not had a coordinator that's been able to go out and find out, what systems are being used, whether it's the call taking system or the dispatching system, or even just the computer systems, like the hardware and peripherals themselves that all the different public safety answering points are utilizing. And so it's going to take some time. I would say, this first year, it's all about building the relationships, and then starting to have those conversations about the different capabilities, and doing some analysis on what's a good practice or a good system that an agency is using that maybe others might want to look at, or what's some good procedures that an agency is using that other agencies might want to adopt. And so it's gonna take some time. because we only have the one person that's trying to reach the whole entire state. They do have some support from our statewide interoperability coordinator, who's also our mission support manager, and then the deputy statewide interoperability coordinator. So those three individuals working together to try to cover and find out what can be done, it's just going to take some time. And you know, one of the other challenges is, like I said, we're not able to take advantage of federal funding for 911 programs, and so there may be, you know, some potential projects and things that there's a lot of buy-in from these public safety answering points and their agencies to want to pursue. And you know, overall, just like in Clark County as an example, you have Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department is your primary answering point. When you call that number for 911, they ask police, fire, medical. If you say fire, medical, they transfer that call to the Combined Communications Center, which is located in Las Vegas Fire Rescue. So it's a completely different facility and, you know, completely different team that's working on that call. And they have different processes and procedures and things like that. So even just within a local entity like this, it's challenging, you know, to coordinate. They've done quite a bit in Clark County to do so, but there's differences, right? They aren't able to see what the other is doing, or they might not need to see what the other is doing, but they have some challenges with inefficiencies with communicating back and forth between one another, because it could be a call that gets forwarded to fire EMS, but then you find out when people arrive on scene that there is some law enforcement entity on there, and then you have to get back on the call with Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and coordinate your responses and those kinds of things. And so, you know, I know that on the local level, there's a huge appetite for wanting to be more interoperable amongst the different public safety answering points, to where if one entity was impacted, another might be able to take on those calls or alleviate call volume, those kinds of things. But there's just no systems in place, and then it's costly to take on those projects, because you're talking about communications infrastructure and you know, broadband access and things like that that might not be available outside of urban areas as well. So.
Thank you. And is there any match grant available from the federal government, like if we were to invest in some of this new infrastructure?
I would have to come back to that. I don't know right off the top of my head. I know that, you know, just committing to the broadband expansion, so outside of 911, but getting especially the rural entities access to broadband is a big first step. So any of those grants through, you know, whether it's the infrastructure bill that established some of those things, that might be something helpful. But you know, getting broadband access is a good step towards getting to next generation 911. But in the short term, it could just be the best practices with procedures that don't require these big infrastructure things, and that's what that coordinator would be doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Members, any additional questions? It doesn't appear that there's any additional questions. Thank you so much for your presentation, for joining us. I think it was your first time here in GA too, so yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll go to the final item on our agenda for today, and we'll open it up for the second round of public comment. If you're listening online and would like to provide a public comment, please call 888-475-4499, then enter the meeting ID 865-8476-2508 and press pound. When prompted for a participant ID, press pound again. At this time, I'll invite anyone from the packed room in Carson City to join us here if you wish to testify in public comment. As a reminder, public comment will be limited to 2 minutes. Does it appear that anyone from the packed room in Carson City is going to be joining us today? So I'll go to the packed room here in Las Vegas, Nevada. Is there anyone here in Las Vegas, Nevada wishing to testify in public comment? It doesn't appear that there are any at this time. Jumping to the testimony bench, but I'll go ahead and check on the line. Is there anyone wishing to call in to testify in public comment?
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working, but there are no callers for public comment at this time.
I'm so surprised that was such a full day of public comment. I'm surprised we get out of here on time. Thank you so much to all the presenters for bearing with us and joining us for those presentations. I think we learned a lot and had a good conversation about, and hopefully opened up some conversations for legislation in the future. I know Assemblyman MacArthur, he had a lot to say, but we just took the words right out of his mouth. I think because he actually joined me yesterday in my classroom to speak to students and tell them cool war stories and FBI stories yesterday. So thank you again, Assemblyman MacArthur, for joining us over at my school. They appreciated that. I think you're very cool. I don't believe there's any other questions. Just to let members of the public know, we will likely be rescheduling and probably consolidating the May and June date to have a full day of government affairs. So you can join us for an all-day GA meeting sometime at the end of May, beginning of June. But we'll get more information out as soon as we can. At this time, the meeting is adjourned.